In 1976, as America celebrated its bicentennial with fireworks and parades, a different kind of American story was quietly unfolding in the windswept plains of Wyoming. A soldier returned from battle buried a secret at a small machine shop, a secret that would remain hidden for nearly half a century. Today, in the forgotten town of Fairhaven, where the prairie meets the mountains, stands Hart's Auto, a weathered garage with a sign hanging by a single rusted chain. Inside, Evelyn Hart, 38 years old, with calloused hands and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, is fixing a veteran's truck free of charge. Oil-stained and determined, she doesn't realize that this simple act of kindness will unlock a chain of events that will change her life forever. For the truck belongs to Frank Bowers, a Marine who carries more than just the visible scars of his service. And what awaits Evelyn isn't just a flatbed loaded with new equipment and a heart-wrenching letter. It's a forgotten military legacy, a Bronze Star medal, and a question: how does an ordinary mechanic become the keeper of one of America's unsung heroic traditions? The Wyoming morning breaks cold and clear over Fairhaven, population 2,732. The early sun catches on the rusted metal roofs of Main Street's buildings, most of which have stood since the 1950s. At the edge of town, almost swallowed by the vast landscape, Hart's Auto sits like a stubborn holdout against time itself. The gravel lot is empty, except for a weathered blue Ford F-150 with oxidized paint but immaculately maintained mechanics. The truck belongs to Evelyn Hart, third-generation owner of the garage her grandfather built after returning from World War II. The sign above the entrance has faded. The wooden boards of the structure have grayed with age, but the reputation for honest work has endured, even if the customers haven't. Inside, the concrete floor bears the stains of decades of repairs. Dark patches where engines leaked, ghostly tire marks, and the occasional splatter of transmission fluid that refused to be scrubbed away. Meticulously organized tools hang on pegboards, wrenches arranged by size, sockets in labeled drawers, specialized equipment carefully preserved despite their age. This isn't just a garage, it's a museum of American automotive history. Evelyn turns the key in the padlock, the familiar resistance giving way with a satisfying click. The heavy door groans open on hinges that have needed oil for 20 years. The scent of the place hits her first. Motor oil, metal shavings, the lingering sweetness of engine degreaser, and beneath it all, the ghost of her father's cigarettes, though he's been gone for 15 years. The morning light filters through windows clouded by years of dust and exhaust, casting golden beams across the workbenches. Evelyn flips the circuit breakers, and the fluorescent lights flicker to life with a hum. The radio on the workbench awakens to the local station, commodity prices, weather reports, and news that hasn't changed much in decades. Evelyn moves with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this ritual thousands of times. Coffee maker switched on, appointment book opened, computer booted up, an ancient desktop that wheezes to life like an old man rising from a comfortable chair. Her coveralls, faded blue with Hart's Auto embroidered over the heart, hang by the office door. The name patch simply reads, Evelyn. No need for titles here. She pauses at the wall of photographs near the office. 4 generations of Harts, all in uniform except her. Her grandfather in his army dress blues. Her father Michael in desert camo. Her brother Jack in his service photo, forever 23. And Evelyn, in her high school graduation photo, the only one who didn't answer the call to service, the only one left to mind the shop. The coffee maker sputters its last, filling the small office with the aroma of fresh brew. Evelyn pours it into a mug that reads, Mechanics do it with tools, a Father's Day gift from years ago. The bitter warmth is a familiar comfort against the morning chill that seeps through the building's aging walls. The phone hasn't rung yet. It rings less and less these days. The new dealership on the highway offers warranties, loaner cars, and waiting rooms with Wi-Fi. Hart's Auto offers honesty, fair prices, and a mechanic who remembers your children's names. In 2005, that's not always enough. Not always. Evelyn sips her coffee and opens the ledger. The columns of red outnumber the black. Property taxes due next month. parts suppliers wanting payment. The hydraulic lift needs certification. The computer needs updating to read newer car diagnostics. All problems that require the one thing she doesn't have: money. The wall clock, an advertisement for Pennzoil from 1973, ticks away the morning hours. Evelyn moves to the '04 Chevy in the bay, Mrs. Calloway's car, in for a timing belt. Simple work, but it keeps the lights on. Her hands move with practiced precision, muscle memory taking over as her mind drifts to harder questions. How much longer can she keep this place running? What would her father say about the state of his legacy? The radio drones on, a backdrop to the mechanical symphony of ratchets and wrenches. A weather report predicts snow by the weekend. The commodity prices for cattle are down again. A brief mention of veteran benefits being expanded for those who served in certain classified Cold War operations. The timing belt goes on smoothly. Evelyn adjusts the tension with the precision of a surgeon, her calloused fingers feeling for the perfect resistance. These are the moments when she feels most at peace, when metal and rubber yield to her expertise, when broken things become whole again under her care. The sound of tires on gravel pulls her from her mechanical meditation. A customer, unexpected, unscheduled, and therefore a welcome surprise. Through the open bay door, she sees an old pickup truck limping into the lot, its engine coughing like a lifetime smoker on his last cigarette. The vehicle is at least 40 years old, a 1985 Ford F-250, once red but now a patchwork of rust and primer. It rolls to a stop, the engine giving one final shudder before dying completely. For a long moment, nothing happens. Then the driver's door creaks open with the reluctance of old hinges, and a man steps out slowly, deliberately, as if each movement requires careful planning. He's tall, somewhere in his 70s, with the lean hardness of someone who has never known an easy day. His face is weathered like the Wyoming landscape itself, deep lines carved by sun and wind and years. He wears a faded flannel shirt, jeans worn white at the stress points, and a baseball cap that reads USMC in faded gold thread. The man surveys the garage with the careful assessment of someone used to evaluating terrain. His eyes, sharp despite his age, take in every detail: the worn building, the meticulous organization, the wall of family photos visible through the office window. Finally, his gaze settles on Evelyn, and something passes across his face. Recognition, perhaps, though they've never met. "Morning, you Hart's girl?" "I'm Evelyn Hart. This is my shop." And the man nods as if confirming something to himself. "Frank Bowers. My truck's seen better days." Evelyn moves toward the vehicle, already assessing the possibilities. "Sounds like your timing's off. Maybe fuel line issues, too. When's the last time you had it serviced?" Frank Bowers allows a small smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Bush was president. The first one." This pulls a genuine laugh from Evelyn. She circles the truck, noting the military sticker on the bumper, the purple heart plate partially obscured by mud. "What brings you to Fairhaven, Mr. Bowers? Don't think I've seen you around before." "Just passing through. Got business in Casper, but this old girl had other ideas." He pats the truck's hood with unexpected affection. "Think you can get her running again?" Evelyn is already popping the hood, confidence in every movement. "I haven't met an engine I couldn't fix yet. Might take time to source parts for something this vintage, though." The hood rises to reveal an engine compartment that tells its own story. Aftermarket parts next to original components. Repairs upon repairs. A vehicle kept running through determination rather than practical sense. But beneath the patchwork, Evelyn recognizes solid engineering. They built them to last back then. Frank watches her assessment with the intensity of a man who has learned to read people quickly. "You've got your father's eye." Evelyn's hands pause on the distributor cap. "You knew my father?" Frank looks away, suddenly interested in the distant mountains. "Lot of Michaels in the service, just making conversation." The deflection is obvious, but Evelyn doesn't press. Veterans have their reasons for keeping things close to the chest. Instead, she refocuses on the engine, methodically checking the usual suspects: battery connections, fuel filter, ignition system. Her diagnosis takes shape with each component examined. "Fuel pump's shot and you've got a vacuum leak. Distributor needs rebuilding too. She straightens up, wiping her hands again. I can order parts, but it'll take a few days to get them in. Not many people keeping 85 F-250 components on the shelf these days. Frank nods, unsurprised. What's that going to run me? Evelyn does quick calculations in her head. Parts will be about 600, labor another 4 or so. She watches his face, sees the slight tightening around his eyes. I can work with you on the labor if money's tight. Frank's posture stiffens slightly. I don't take charity. Neither do I, but I give professional courtesy to veterans, my family's policy. Something changes in Frank's expression, a softening around the edges, a recognition of a shared code. Your brother was Jack Hart? Force Recon? The question catches Evelyn off guard. Jack's service wasn't exactly public knowledge, especially not his unit assignment. You knew him? Frank shakes his head. Knew of him. Men like your brother make an impression, even from a distance. He looks at the ground, then back at Evelyn with newfound respect. I'll accept your professional courtesy then. Seems only right. Evelyn nods, a silent understanding passing between them. Let me get you some paperwork. There's a motel 2 blocks down if you need a place to stay while I work on this. As she turns toward the office, Frank calls after her. One more thing, Ms. Hart. There's something in the glove compartment, a service medal that needs cleaning. Previous owner must have left it there. Think you could take a look while you've got the truck? I'd rather not have something like that rattling around uncared for. Of course. I'll take good care of it. By noon, Frank has signed the work order and departed for the motel, leaving his truck and its mysteries in Evelyn's capable hands. The garage falls quiet again, save for the radio and the occasional clang of tools. The light shifts as the sun climbs higher, casting different shadows across the concrete floor. Evelyn returns to Mrs. Calloway's timing belt, finishing the job with practiced efficiency. But her mind keeps drifting to the old Marine and his strange request. Veterans passing through isn't unusual in a town near the interstate, but something about Frank Bowers doesn't fit the pattern. The way he looked at the family photos, the mention of her brother's unit, the medal in the glove compartment. After completing the Chevy's repairs, Evelyn turns her attention to Frank's truck. The diagnosis was accurate. Fuel pump failed, vacuum leaks at multiple points, distributor worn beyond reasonable service. She calls her parts supplier in Casper, placing orders for components that haven't been standard stock since the Clinton administration. 2 to 3 days. That's if we're lucky. Might have to go to a salvage yard for some of this. Do what you can. I've got a veteran waiting on it. And with the parts ordered, curiosity finally drives her to the glove compartment. It opens with a reluctant click, revealing the expected items: owner's manual, registration, insurance card. And there, wrapped in a faded bandana, something heavy and metallic. Evelyn unwraps it carefully. The medal is immediately recognizable. A Bronze Star, one of the highest honors for military heroism. The ribbon is faded, the medal tarnished by years of neglect. She turns it over in her hands, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. On the back, an inscription. Captain Michael J. Hart, Sentinel Squad, 1972. Her father's name, her father's medal. One he never mentioned, never displayed alongside his other commendations. Evelyn stares at it, trying to make sense of the impossible object in her hands. Her father had served in Vietnam, had earned several decorations, all of which hung proudly in the office. But a Bronze Star? And what was Sentinel Squad? He'd always said he was with the 25th Infantry Division. The questions multiply with each passing second. How did Frank Bowers have her father's medal? Why pretend it belonged to the previous owner? What game was the old Marine playing? The afternoon light fades as Evelyn sits in the truck's cab, turning the medal over and over in her hands. Outside, the wind picks up, whistling through the gaps in the garage's aging walls. The radio forecaster warns of an approaching storm system. But inside Evelyn's mind, a different kind of storm is brewing. One made of questions without answers, of connections that shouldn't exist. Finally, she wraps the medal back in its bandana and tucks it into her pocket rather than returning it to the glove compartment. Whatever Frank Bauer's game is, she intends to understand it before playing her next move. The next 2 days pass in a blur of routine work and unusual research. Between oil changes and brake jobs, Evelyn searches online for information about Sentinel Squad, finding nothing but vague references to classified Cold War operations. She pulls out her father's service records from the filing cabinet in the office, poring over documents she's seen dozens of times before, looking for anything she might have missed. The record shows honorable service, commendations for valor, but nothing about a special unit, nothing about a Bronze Star. On the evening of the second day, as Evelyn is locking up the garage, a black SUV with government plates rolls slowly past the building. It doesn't stop, doesn't turn in, just proceeds down the road at a deliberate pace. Something about its presence, the tinted windows, the unhurried surveillance, raises the hair on Evelyn's neck. She watches until its taillights disappear around the bend, then checks that all the locks are secure before heading to her small apartment above the garage. That night, she dreams of her father in unfamiliar jungle terrain, wearing a uniform without insignia, his face set in an expression she never saw in life, a look of grim determination tinged with fear. The parts for Frank's truck arrive the following afternoon, most of them anyway. The fuel pump is a modern replacement that will require some adaptation, but it'll work. The distributor parts are genuine Ford, salvaged from a vehicle long since scrapped. Evelyn loses herself in the reassembly process, the familiar rhythm of mechanical work providing comfort amid the strangeness of recent days. By evening, Frank's truck is running again. Not perfectly, but better than it has in years. The engine catches on the first try, settling into a steady rumble that speaks of American engineering from a bygone era. Evelyn allows herself a small smile of satisfaction as she closes the hood. Whatever else Frank Bauer's might be, his truck deserves to run properly. She calls the motel, leaving a message that the vehicle is ready. Then she waits, the Bronze Star heavy in her pocket, questions heavy on her mind. Frank arrives just before closing, walking the 2 blocks from the motel rather than accepting the offer of a ride. He looks the same as before, weathered, watchful, carrying himself with the alert posture of someone who has never fully left the battlefield behind. He inspects the truck thoroughly, listening to the engine, checking under the hood with the eye of someone who knows machinery. Good work. Sounds better than it has in a decade. Evelyn leans against the workbench, arms crossed. Your medal is interesting, especially since it has my father's name on it. If Frank is surprised by her directness, he doesn't show it. He simply nods, as if he expected nothing less. Wondered if you'd look at it properly. Most people these days, they don't pay attention to details. I'm not most people. And you didn't just happen to be passing through Fairhaven with my father's Bronze Star in your glove compartment. So why don't we cut through the bull, and you tell me what this is really about? Frank studies her for a long moment, his eyes assessing. Finally he sighs, a sound that carries the weight of decades. Not here. Some conversations shouldn't happen in the open. You got somewhere private we can talk? The apartment above the garage is small but neat. A living room with a worn couch and a TV that's rarely turned on. A kitchenette with mismatched appliances. A bedroom visible through a partially open door. The walls are adorned with framed technical diagrams of engines and a few family photos. It's the home of someone who lives simply, who prioritizes function over form. Frank stands awkwardly in the center of the room, declining Evelyn's offer of a seat, declining her offer of coffee. He removes his USMC cap, revealing thinning white hair, and turns it in his hands, a soldier preparing to deliver difficult news. Your father was a hero, not the kind they make movies about, the kind that does what needs doing and never talks about it after. Evelyn remains standing as well, arms crossed defensively. I know that already. Frank shakes his head slightly. You know what he let you know, what was safe for you to know. He meets her eyes directly. Michael wasn't just 25th Infantry. That was his cover. He was Sentinel Squad, a specialized unit that handled sensitive operations during the Cold War, operations that officially never happened. Evelyn's posture tightens. If this was so classified, why are you telling me now? Because the classification period ended last year. 50 years is a long time to keep a secret, but that's how it works with the things we did. And because Michael would want you to know the truth about who he was, what he did. Especially now. Especially now? Evelyn echoes, confusion evident. Frank reaches into his jacket pocket and withdraws an envelope, worn at the edges as if carried for a long time. This will explain better than I can. It's not everything. Some things I still can't talk about. But it's enough to start with. Evelyn takes the envelope with reluctant hands. Why you? Why now? Frank's expression shifts, a glimpse of deep sadness breaking through his stoic exterior. Because I'm the last one left. All the others are gone now. And promises matter, Ms. Hart. The ones we make to our brothers in arms most of all. He moves toward the door, placing his cap back on his head with military precision. Read it. Then decide what you want to do. I'll come back tomorrow evening. What if I decide I want nothing to do with whatever this is? Frank pauses at the door, his hand on the knob. Then I'll respect that. Take the medal, drive away, and you'll never see me again. His eyes, when they meet hers, carry an unexpected gentleness. But Michael Hart's daughter isn't the type to turn her back on the truth, no matter how complicated it makes things. With that, he's gone, footsteps heavy on the stairs, leaving Evelyn alone with an envelope and questions that multiply by the second. The envelope contains several items: a handwritten letter on yellowed paper, a faded photograph of 7 men in unmarked military fatigues standing before an unfamiliar landscape, and what appears to be a map with coordinates and markings that make little immediate sense. Evelyn sits at her small kitchen table, spreading the items before her like pieces of a puzzle. Her hands tremble slightly as she unfolds the letter. To my daughter Evelyn, it begins in handwriting she recognizes immediately, her father's neat, precise script. If you're reading this, then Frank has found you, and the time for secrets has passed. The letter continues, revealing a story so different from the one she grew up with that it feels like learning about a stranger. Her father writes of Sentinel Squad, 8 men chosen for their specific skills, assigned to missions that officially didn't exist. Operations in countries where American forces weren't supposed to be. Tasks that couldn't be acknowledged. Victories that couldn't be celebrated. We did things I can never tell you about, the letter reads. Some I'm not proud of, some that saved countless lives. The medal they gave me, keep it hidden, not out of shame, but because some honors come with obligations that last beyond service. As Evelyn reads, the storm that has been threatening for days finally arrives. Rain lashes against the windows, wind howls through the eaves of the old building. Thunder rumbles in the distance, nature's percussion accompanying the revelation of decades-old secrets. The letter speaks of a final mission in 1976, a facility in Wyoming where something happened, something significant enough that her father felt compelled to hide evidence of it, something connected to the map included with the letter. If Frank has deemed it time for you to know, then the classification has expired, but the importance hasn't. The letter continues. What we found, what we protected. It wasn't just for our country then. It's for our future now. The last paragraph strikes Evelyn like a physical blow. I never told you the full truth about my service because that silence protected you. But you're my daughter, stubborn, principled, smarter than I ever was. You'll make the right choice about what to do with this information. Trust Frank. He was my right hand then, and he's my promise keeper now. Whatever happens, remember that I was most proud not of any medal, but of the woman you've become. The letter is signed simply, Dad. Evelyn sits motionless at the table long after she finishes reading, the sound of rain creating a cocoon of white noise around her. The photograph draws her attention next. 7 men, her father among them, standing before what appears to be a bunker entrance, partially concealed by landscape. She recognizes Frank Bowers, too, 40 years younger, but with the same watchful eyes. On the back, faded pencil marks list names: Michael Hart, Frank Bowers, William Reynolds, John Kavanaugh, Thomas Wheeler, Robert Chen, David Miller. The map is harder to decipher. Topographical markings overlaid with symbols that must have had specific meaning to Sentinel Squad. But one thing is clear: the location marked is somewhere in Wyoming, perhaps not far from Fairhaven itself. Morning finds Evelyn still at the table, surrounded by coffee cups, the contents of the envelope, and printouts from her late-night research sessions. Her laptop screen displays declassified documents about Cold War special operations, fragments of information that hint at but never fully reveal the activities of units like Sentinel Squad. She's so absorbed in her research that she almost misses the sound of tires on wet gravel outside. Moving to the window, she sees Frank's truck pulling into the lot below, well ahead of their agreed meeting time. But something is different. The truck is followed by a flatbed trailer loaded with equipment, its contents concealed under heavy tarps despite the rain having passed. Evelyn watches as Frank emerges from his truck, moving with the same measured deliberation she noticed before. He glances up at her window, seeming unsurprised to find her watching. He offers a small nod, not quite a greeting, more an acknowledgement of a shared understanding. The driver of the flatbed, a younger man in a nondescript uniform, hands Frank a clipboard. Papers are signed. A brief conversation ensues that Evelyn can't hear from her vantage point. Then the flatbed driver returns to his vehicle and departs, leaving Frank standing beside a trailer that seems entirely out of place in the small garage lot. Evelyn grabs her jacket and heads downstairs, curiosity overcoming caution. By the time she reaches the lot, Frank is removing the tarps, revealing what lies beneath: brand new garage equipment, a hydraulic lift that makes her aging one look like an antique, a diagnostic computer system still in its factory packaging, toolboxes filled with precision instruments, everything a modern garage could need, everything her garage desperately needs but can't afford. What is this? Frank secures the last of the tarps before answering. Promised your father I'd look after you if things went sideways. Never had to. You did fine on your own. But now you might need resources. Resources for what exactly? Frank looks around the empty lot, his expression cautious. For what comes next, if you choose to follow through. He nods toward the garage. Let's get this equipment inside first. Then we can talk properly. The morning passes in a flurry of activity. Together they unload the trailer, positioning the new equipment in the garage. Frank works with surprising strength for his age, directing the placement of each item with the tactical precision of someone used to maximizing resources. By noon, Hart's auto looks like a different place, still worn around the edges, but now containing technology and tools that would be the envy of any mechanic in the state. As they finish positioning the diagnostic computer, Evelyn's patience reaches its limit. Enough stalling. Tell me what this is really about, all of it. Frank wipes his hands on a shop rag, his expression grave. Your father and I, along with the others in that photo, were part of something important, something that could still matter today. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. In '76, we were assigned to secure and assess a research facility outside of Casper. Scientists there had developed something that certain people wanted buried. What kind of something? The kind that changes the equation, Frank replies cryptically. But there was an incident. The facility was compromised. We managed to secure the essential materials, but decisions were made at levels above our pay grade. The project was officially terminated, all records sealed. Evelyn leans against a workbench, struggling to process this information. And my father? How does he fit into all this? Frank's expression softens slightly. Michael disagreed with the decision to bury everything. Thought the work should continue, but under different circumstances. So he secured certain items. Created a contingency plan. His eyes meet Evelyn's directly. The medals weren't just for bravery, though we had that in spades. They were markers, identification for those of us who were part of the plan. A plan for what? Before Frank can answer, The sound of an approaching vehicle draws their attention. Through the open garage door, they see a black SUV, similar to the one Evelyn noticed days earlier, pulling into the lot. Two men in suits emerge, their movements carrying the unmistakable precision of federal agents. Frank's posture changes instantly, a soldier recognizing potential threat. "Company. Earlier than I expected." Evelyn straightens, instinctively moving closer to her father's old workbench. "Who are they?" "Depends. Could be oversight making sure old secrets stay buried. Could be something else entirely." He turns to her, his expression urgent. "Whatever happens next, remember, your father believed in you, and so do I." The suited men approach with practiced casualness, their eyes scanning the garage interior, noting exits, positions, details that ordinary visitors would miss. The taller one speaks first, his tone professionally neutral. "Ms. Hart, I'm Agent Wilson. This is Agent Taylor. We'd like to ask you a few questions about a former military installation in this region." Frank steps forward slightly, positioning himself between Evelyn and the agents. "Gentlemen, Frank Bowers, USMC, retired. What branch are you representing today?" The question causes a barely perceptible pause before Wilson responds. "Department of Defense, Special Oversight Division. We're conducting a routine follow-up on recently declassified operations." His attention returns to Evelyn. "Ms. Hart, has anyone recently approached you regarding your father's service record or any unusual military installations?" The question hangs in the air, loaded with implications. Evelyn feels the weight of her father's letter in her pocket, sees the new equipment surrounding them, remembers Frank's warnings. A choice presents itself: truth, evasion, or something in between. "My father served honorably. If there's something specific about his service you're interested in, I'd be happy to help if I can." Agent Taylor, who has been silently observing until now, speaks up. "We understand your father was Captain Michael Hart, 25th Infantry Division, later assigned to Specialized Operations. We're particularly interested in his activities around 1976, specifically involving a facility designated Sierra 9. Frank's expression remains neutral, but Evelyn notices his hands tense slightly at the mention of the facility. She maintains her composure, years of negotiating with parts suppliers and difficult customers serving her well. "My father didn't discuss his service much, especially not classified operations. Is there something specific you're looking for?" Wilson and Taylor exchange glances, a silent communication between partners. Wilson produces a photograph from his jacket pocket, a satellite image of what appears to be an abandoned complex partially reclaimed by nature. "This facility was decommissioned decades ago," Wilson explains. "However, recent intelligence suggests that certain materials may have been relocated prior to official closure, materials that could be of significant interest given current national security priorities." Evelyn studies the photograph, careful to show appropriate curiosity without recognition. "And you think my father was involved in this?" "We know Sentinel Squad was tasked with securing the facility during decommissioning," Taylor states flatly. "What we don't know is exactly what happened during those final days. Records are incomplete." Frank steps forward, examining the photograph with professional interest. "A lot of years have passed since then. Memories get foggy, paperwork gets lost, nature of the business." Wilson's attention shifts fully to Frank. "Mr. Bowers, your presence here is interesting timing. According to our records, you were also part of Sentinel Squad, were you not?" "I served where I was told to serve," Frank replies evenly. "Classified means classified, even after all these years." A tense silence fills the garage, broken only by the distant sound of a passing truck on the highway. The agents seem to be waiting for something, a slip, a reaction, any indication that their suspicions are justified. Finally, Wilson retrieves the photograph and produces a business card instead. "If either of you recalls anything that might be relevant to our inquiry, please contact us at this number." He hands the card to Evelyn. "Particularly if you encounter any unusual items or documentation related to Sierra 9. Evelyn accepts the card with a neutral nod. "Of course." Always happy to help our government. The agents depart with professional nods but no smiles. Through the garage windows, Evelyn and Frank watch as they return to their SUV, speak briefly on a radio, and drive away with unhurried purpose. Once they're out of sight, Frank releases a long breath. Well, that complicates things. Complicates what exactly? Those men think my father took something from this Sierra 9 place. Did he? Frank's eyes meet hers, steady and uncompromising. Your father did what he believed was right, what needed to be done when official channels failed. He gestures to the letter in her pocket. The map your father left, it doesn't lead to Sierra 9. It leads to where he secured what mattered most. Evelyn pulls out the map, studying it with new urgency. And what exactly am I supposed to find there? Frank's answer is interrupted by the sound of another vehicle pulling into the lot. This one, a battered Jeep Wrangler with Army veteran plates. A young man emerges, early 30s, with the lean build and alert posture of someone recently discharged from service. He approaches the open garage door with the slight hesitation of someone unsure of their welcome. Excuse me, I'm looking for the owner? Someone in town said you might be hiring mechanics. Evelyn and Frank exchange glances, an interruption, but perhaps a fortuitous one given the recent visit from federal agents. Evelyn steps forward, professional persona sliding back into place. That's me, Evelyn Hart. The young man straightens slightly, military habits evident in his posture. Dylan Carter, ma'am. Just finished my service last month. Was hoping to find work that uses my skills. He gestures to the Jeep behind him. I specialized in vehicle maintenance in the Army. Figured a garage might be a good fit. Evelyn assesses him quickly. Clean cut, direct gaze, hands that show evidence of mechanical work. Under normal circumstances, she'd explain that Hart's auto barely generates enough income to support her, let alone an employee. But these aren't normal circumstances, and the timing of his arrival raises questions of its own. Your timing is interesting, Mr. Carter. We just had a delivery of new equipment that needs setting up. She gestures to the diagnostic computer. You familiar with systems like these? Dylan's expression brightens. Yes, ma'am. Worked with similar models on deployment, latest OBD interfaces, wireless diagnostics, the works. Frank has moved slightly to the side, observing the interaction with the careful attention of someone evaluating potential threats or allies. His eyes narrow slightly as he studies Dylan. Which unit were you with, son? 10th Mountain Division, sir. 2 tours in the Middle East, 1 in Africa. Frank nods, something like approval in his expression. Good outfit. Tough assignments. Dylan's attention returns to Evelyn. I understand if you don't have permanent positions available, would be willing to work on contract while the equipment gets set up. References available if you need them. Evelyn makes a decision, one based partly on instinct, partly on the sudden need for allies in whatever situation she's found herself in. Let's start with today. Help us get this diagnostic system operational, and we'll discuss next steps after that. Dylan's response is immediate and professional. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity. As he moves toward the equipment, rolling up his sleeves with practiced efficiency, Frank steps closer to Evelyn, lowering his voice. Convenient timing. Too convenient? Frank's expression remains neutral. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, we proceed carefully. He glances at the map in her hand. Tonight, after closing, we'll follow your father's breadcrumbs, see what he left behind. The remainder of the afternoon passes in a strange new routine. Dylan proves himself immediately useful, setting up the diagnostic system with expert precision, explaining its features to Evelyn in clear, practical terms. Frank remains in the background, ostensibly organizing tools, but clearly watching, assessing, forming judgments about the young veteran who appeared precisely when additional help might be needed. Mrs. Calloway arrives to collect her Chevy, eyes widening at the new equipment being installed. Moving up in the world, Evelyn? Just some overdue upgrades. Gotta keep current with the newer models. As evening approaches, customers depart, and the rhythm of the garage slows. Dylan finishes connecting the last components of the diagnostic system, demonstrating its features with evident pride in a job well done. Evelyn is impressed, despite her suspicions. He clearly knows his way around automotive technology. Systems operational. Want to run a test diagnosis? Before Evelyn can respond, Frank interjects from across the garage. Getting late. Might be better to pick this up tomorrow with a fresh start. Dylan glances between them, sensing the unspoken tension. Of course. I can come back in the morning if that works for you, Ms. Hart. Evelyn considers the options. Sending Dylan away means potentially losing an ally if he's legitimate, or removing a complication if he isn't. Keeping him close could be either an advantage or a risk. Tomorrow morning would be fine. 8 o'clock sharp. Dylan nods, gathering his jacket. Thank you for the opportunity, Ms. Hart. Mr. Bowers. He extends a hand to Frank, who accepts it after a moment's hesitation. Honor to meet a fellow veteran. After Dylan departs, Frank moves to the windows, watching until the Jeep disappears down the road. Could be exactly what he appears to be, or not. Seems to know his way around engines. So do a lot of people with ulterior motives. Frank turns back to her, expression serious. Your father's map. It's time to see what he thought was worth hiding for all these years. The sun is setting as they lock up the garage, casting long shadows across the gravel lot. Evelyn secures the new equipment, double-checks all entrances, and activates the security system that came with the delivery, another upgrade she hadn't requested but now appreciates. Frank's truck rumbles to life in the gathering dusk, its recently repaired engine running with renewed vigor. Evelyn slides into the passenger seat, the map and her father's letter secure in her jacket pocket. The Bronze Star medal rests in a small pouch around her neck, a talisman of sorts, a connection to the father she thought she knew and the one she's now discovering. As they pull away from Hart's auto, neither notices the dark sedan parked half a block down, its occupant watching through specialized optics, documenting their departure with professional detachment. The Wyoming landscape unfolds before them as Frank navigates back roads with the confidence of someone who has studied the terrain thoroughly. The truck's headlights cut through the growing darkness, illuminating fence lines, occasional farmhouses, and the ever-present silhouette of distant mountains. Your father loved this country, Frank says, after they've been driving for nearly an hour. Not just America, this land specifically. Said it reminded him of what we were fighting for. Open spaces, freedom to live as you choose, beauty that hasn't been tamed. Evelyn watches the landscape pass, trying to see it through her father's eyes. He never talked much about the war, or his service after, just said he'd done his duty. Frank nods, understanding in his expression. Some experiences defy words, and some secrets become habits that are hard to break. He glances at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. Michael was the best of us, smartest, most principled, most. When orders conflicted with his conscience, he found a third path. Is that what happened at Sierra 9? He found a third path? Frank's hands tighten slightly on the steering wheel. In '76, we were assigned to oversee the decommissioning of a research facility. Scientists there had been working on something important, something that could have changed a lot of equations if it had been developed properly, but decisions were made at high levels to terminate the project, destroy the research. Why? Politics, economics, the usual reasons progress gets buried. Frank's voice carries decades of resignation. Your father believed the research should be preserved even if the project was terminated, so he created a contingency, secured key materials, documented what mattered most. The truck turns onto an even smaller road, barely more than a pair of tire tracks through open rangeland. According to the odometer, they've traveled approximately 30 miles from Fairhaven, moving generally northwest. Sierra 9 was officially a meteorological research station, Frank continues. In reality, it was developing alternative energy technologies, things decades ahead of their time, things that threatened powerful interests in the energy sector. Evelyn processes this information, connecting it to what she knows of the period. The oil crisis, energy concerns, the complex politics of the Cold War era. And my father, Stole research from this facility? Secured, Frank corrects firmly. For posterity, because he believed that someday, when politics and profit weren't the only considerations, this work would matter again. He slows the truck as they approach what appears to be an abandoned property, a small, dilapidated structure barely visible in the moonlight. And that day might be now. The truck comes to a stop 100 yards from the structure. Frank kills the engine but leaves the headlights on, illuminating what was once perhaps a line shack or small ranch outbuilding. Now it's little more than weathered boards held together by stubborn nails and the mercy of Wyoming's dry climate. This is it? The obvious hiding places are the first ones people look. Your father was smarter than that. They exit the truck, the night air carrying the bite of approaching autumn. Stars blanket the sky above them, uncountable pinpoints of light in the absence of city illumination. The only sounds are the cooling tick of the truck's engine and the whisper of wind through prairie grass. Frank leads the way toward the structure, moving with the caution of someone who has approached unknown territory many times before. Evelyn follows, her father's map in one hand, flashlight in the other. The beam reveals details as they draw closer, a structure approximately 15 feet square, walls weathered to a silver gray, roof partially collapsed on one side. Your father purchased this land through a shell corporation in 1977. Officially, it was never developed, just a poor investment on paper. They reach the door, hanging askew on leather hinges that have survived decades of Wyoming seasons. Frank gestures for Evelyn to stay back as he examines the entrance, checking for signs of disturbance or tampering. Doesn't look like anyone's been here in years, but we proceed carefully anyway. The interior smells of dust and abandonment. Flashlight beams reveal a space empty of furnishings, save for a crude wooden table against one wall and what might have once been a chair, now collapsed into component parts. Mouse droppings scatter the dirt floor, and cobwebs hang in thick curtains from the remaining roof beams. Not exactly Fort Knox. That's the point. Nothing worth stealing, nothing worth investigating. Your father's map. What are the exact coordinates listed? 43 to G21, 17.8. N, 106 to G45, 09.2. W. And there's a notation. Depth, 6 feet. Bearing, magnetic north. Help me move this dirt. Here. Together they kneel, using a folding shovel from Frank's truck to dig into the hard-packed soil. The work is methodical, almost reverent, as if they're conducting an archaeological excavation rather than what might technically be grave robbery. 6 inches down, the soil changes texture, becoming looser, easier to displace. This has been disturbed before, filled in carefully but definitely dug up previously. They continue, the hole widening and deepening. At approximately 2 feet, the shovel strikes something solid, a metallic clang that reverberates in the quiet space. Frank gestures for Evelyn to hold the flashlight steady as he carefully clears soil away from their discovery. A metal box emerges, not large, perhaps 2 feet square, constructed of what appears to be stainless steel with a sophisticated locking mechanism. It shows no signs of corrosion despite its years underground, a testament to quality construction and careful preparation. Military-grade storage container, designed to protect contents from environmental damage, electromagnetic interference, even modest radiation. Your father's date of birth. Try it. Evelyn enters the 6-digit sequence, month, day, year. Nothing happens. She tries her own birth date with the same result. The day Sentinel Squad was formed, July 7th, 1970. This combination causes the lock to emit a soft click. The container's seal releases with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Inside, protected by specialized packaging materials, are several items: a bound leather journal, a collection of microfiche slides in protective sleeves, a small hard drive that looks surprisingly modern, and a sealed metal cylinder approximately the size of a thermos. Evelyn reaches for the journal first, her father's handwriting immediately recognizable on the first page. Project Horizon, Contingency Documentation, Michael J. Hart, Sentinel Squad, 1976. Frank's attention is focused on the metal cylinder, which he handles with exceptional care. This is what mattered most, the physical proof. Proof of what? Before Frank can answer, a new sound intrudes on the night, the distant but unmistakable rumble of approaching vehicles. Frank reacts instantly, gathering the container's contents and returning them to their protective housing. "We've got company. Could be coincidence. Could be we were followed." "What now?" "We take what we came for and find another exit strategy. These go with you. I'll take the rest." The vehicle sounds grow louder, at least 2, possibly 3, approaching from the direction they came. Flashlight beams become visible through the structure's broken windows, sweeping the surrounding terrain with purposeful movements. Frank leads Evelyn to the back of the structure, where weathered boards have separated enough to create a potential exit. "Stay low, move fast, head northwest. There's a drainage culvert about 200 yards in that direction. I'll meet you there." "What about you?" "I've been evading pursuit since before you were born, Ms. Hart. Old habits die hard. Go, now." Evelyn slips through the opening, immediately dropping into a crouch as she was instructed. The moonlight provides just enough illumination to navigate without a flashlight, which would immediately give away her position. She moves through the prairie grass, staying low, using natural depressions in the terrain for additional concealment. Behind her, voices become audible, professional, clipped tones issuing orders. Flashlight beams converge on the structure they just abandoned. She doesn't look back, focusing instead on the northwest bearing and the promised drainage culvert. The journal and hard drive press against her body as she moves, physical reminders of the stakes involved. Whatever her father hid here, whatever he protected all these years, it matters enough that others are still searching for it decades later. The drainage culvert appears ahead, a concrete tube approximately 4 feet in diameter, designed to channel seasonal water flow beneath a dirt access road. Evelyn reaches it and hesitates, uncertain whether to enter or wait for Frank. The decision is made for her when a hand touches her shoulder. She whirls, ready to defend herself, only to find Frank crouching beside her, his arrival completely silent despite his age. 3 vehicles, at least 6 personnel, professional operators, likely federal contractors rather than official agents. They're searching the structure now. How did they find us? Questions for later. Right now, we move. This runs for about half a mile, emerges near an old county maintenance yard. From there, we can call for extraction. Extraction? Who exactly are you planning to call? Friends. People who still remember what your father did for them. With no better options, Evelyn follows Frank into the culvert. The concrete tube is dry thanks to the recent lack of rain, though evidence of past water flow is visible in the silt patterns along the bottom. They move in a crouch, flashlights off, guided only by the faint ambient light from either end of the passage. The journal. Your father documented everything. The research, the decision to terminate, the potential applications that were being suppressed. He believed that someday the right people would need to know what happened at Sierra 9. And who are the right people? Originally, it was going to be government oversight. Once enough time had passed that the political considerations were different. But now I think it needs to be public. Too much has changed. Too many of the old safeguards have eroded. They continue in silence, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. After what feels like an eternity of hunched movement through the confined space, a circle of night sky becomes visible ahead, the culvert's exit. Frank pauses before they reach it, placing a hand on Evelyn's arm. From here, things get complicated. Once we leave this culvert, we're committing to seeing this through, to finishing what your father started. Are you ready for that? I've spent my whole life honoring my father's visible legacy. I think it's time I honored the one he kept hidden. Then let's keep moving. Dawn isn't far off and we've got promises to keep. They emerge from its culvert into a shallow ravine, the first hints of pre-dawn light visible on the eastern horizon. Frank orients himself quickly, pointing toward a cluster of buildings visible about a quarter-mile distant, the county maintenance yard he mentioned. Stay along the ravine as much as possible. Less chance of being spotted. They move with purpose, Frank setting a pace that challenges Evelyn despite the age difference between them. The maintenance yard grows larger as they approach, a collection of corrugated metal buildings surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Old county vehicles are parked in neat rows. Snowplows, road graders, dump trucks, the heavy machinery of rural infrastructure. Frank leads them to a gap in the fence where the bottom has been pulled up, creating a space just large enough to slip through. The yard is silent, no sign of workers at this early hour. Office building, southeast corner, there's a landline we can use. They move between vehicles, using them as cover though the yard appears deserted. The office is a small, single-story structure with windows dark. Frank produces a key from his pocket and unlocks the side door with practiced ease. You've been here before. Contingency planning. Your father and I established several rally points if things went sideways. This was one of them. Inside, the office is spartanly furnished. Metal desks, filing cabinets, bulletin boards covered with schedules and safety notices. Frank moves directly to a desk in the corner, lifting the landline receiver and dialing a number from memory. He speaks briefly, using what sounds like a code system, then hangs up. 20 minutes. Transportation is en route. To where exactly? Somewhere we can examine what your father left behind without worrying about uninvited company. Frank gestures toward a small break room. There should be coffee. Might as well fuel up while we wait. The coffee is terrible. Ancient grounds brewed too strong in a pot that hasn't been properly cleaned in months. But it's hot and caffeinated, which is all that matters after the night they've had. They sit in silence for several minutes, the events of the past few hours settling around them like dust after an explosion. My father never mentioned any of this. Not Sierra 9, not Sentinel Squad, not whatever was so important he buried it in the middle of nowhere. Why would he keep me in the dark about something so significant? Frank cradles his styrofoam cup, staring into the black liquid as if it might contain answers. Your father was many things, Ms. Hart. Brilliant engineer, loyal soldier, man of principle, but above all, he was a father who wanted to protect his daughter. Knowledge can be a burden, especially the kind that powerful people want to keep buried. But he left all this for me to find, eventually. On your terms, when the time was right. Michael always played the long game. A beam of headlights sweeps across the window, then disappears. Frank rises immediately, moving to the door to peer out. Our ride. Let's go. Outside, a battered Suburban with mud-caked license plates idles near the maintenance yard gate. The driver is invisible behind tinted windows. Frank approaches without hesitation, opening the rear passenger door and gesturing for Evelyn to enter. The interior is dark, but as her eyes adjust, Evelyn can make out the driver, a woman perhaps in her 60s, with short silver hair and the ramrod posture of someone with military background. She doesn't turn around or introduce herself, merely nods at Frank in the rearview mirror as they enter. Everybody accounted for? And then some. We recovered the package, but we had company. The woman's eyes narrow slightly. Expected? Anticipated as a possibility. Professional. Well-equipped. Not locals. She puts the Suburban in gear, accelerating smoothly away from the maintenance yard. Destination? Frank glances at Evelyn, then back to the driver. The workshop. The woman nods once, taking a sharp turn onto an unmarked dirt road heading east, away from town. No one speaks again for several minutes, the Suburban eating up miles of rough terrain with the ease of a vehicle built for exactly this purpose. Evelyn studies the driver, trying to place her in the constellation of mysterious figures that seem to be emerging from her father's past. Were you part of it too? Sentinel Squad? The woman's eyes meet hers briefly in the rearview mirror. Not directly. Support division. Intelligence analysis. Your father saved my career once, and probably my life, though that was never confirmed. Margaret was our eyes and ears, Frank explains. When the brass wanted something buried, she made sure we knew about it first. Before it could be officially lost, Margaret adds, a hint of old bitterness in her tone. The amount of critical research that disappeared into black budgets and private contractor vaults during that era would make your blood boil. The road winds through increasingly rugged terrain, eventually leading to what appears to be an abandoned ranch property. A weathered sign, barely legible, identifies it as the Circle M Ranch, private property, no trespassing. Margaret pulls the Suburban around to the back of the main house, killing the headlights before bringing the vehicle to a stop. Home sweet home, at least for the next few hours. The ranch house is deceptive. While the exterior maintains the appearance of rural decay, the interior has been modernized in key ways. Solar panels are discreetly mounted on the back roof. Satellite communications equipment is camouflaged within what appears to be an old television antenna. Inside, beneath dusty furniture and faded wallpaper, high-end security systems monitor the perimeter. Margaret leads them to the kitchen, where she activates a series of switches concealed behind a loose baseboard. A section of the floor, what appears to be ordinary linoleum, slides away, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Welcome to the workshop, one of your father's better ideas. The space below is unlike anything Evelyn expected. A fully equipped laboratory and analysis center, maintained in a state of operational readiness despite years of apparent disuse. Computer equipment, much of it looking surprisingly current, lines one wall. A sophisticated ventilation system hums quietly. Workbenches with precision tools stand ready for use. It's as if someone walked away yesterday, expecting to return at any moment. My father built this? After Sierra 9 was shut down, Frank confirms. Used his own money, kept it off every radar. Only 4 people knew it existed. 5 now, Margaret adds, powering up the computer systems with practiced efficiency. Evelyn places the journal and hard drive on the central workbench. Frank adds the microfiche and metal cylinder from his own pack. The assembled items look simultaneously antiquated and dangerous, relics of a Cold War that never fully thawed. So what exactly are we dealing with? What was Project Horizon? Frank and Margaret exchange glances, a silent negotiation about how much to reveal, how quickly. Finally, Frank nods, and Margaret begins. In 1972, the energy crisis was looming. The military was concerned about fuel dependency, especially for forward operating bases in remote locations. Sierra 9 was established to develop alternative energy solutions that wouldn't require constant resupply. Frank takes up the narrative. A team of scientists was assembled, best minds from MIT, Caltech, a few from the private sector. They were given significant funding and minimal oversight. The idea was to let brilliant people solve problems without bureaucratic interference. And they succeeded, Margaret continues, beyond anyone's expectations. By 1976, they had developed a revolutionary energy production method, completely sustainable, incredibly efficient, using materials that were widely available even in combat zones. So what went wrong? Evelyn asks, sensing the inevitable turn in the story. Frank's expression darkens. Politics, oil prices, corporate interests, take your pick. Once certain people realized the potential economic impact of what Sierra 9 had created, the project was suddenly deemed strategically unnecessary and scheduled for immediate termination. Termination meaning? Complete shutdown, all research confiscated, all records sealed or destroyed, personnel reassigned with non-disclosure agreements that would bury them if they spoke a word. As Margaret activates a specialized scanner, carefully placing the microfiche slides into its feed mechanism. Your father and his team were given 48 hours to pack up 5 years of work. That's when he contacted Sentinel Squad. We were supposed to provide security during the shutdown, Frank explains. Make sure everything was packed up properly, that no foreign intelligence assets interfered with the process. Standard procedure for a sensitive site decommissioning. But my father had other ideas. Frank nods, something like pride flashing across his weathered features. Michael recognized what was happening. He knew that research wasn't being secured. It was being buried. So he created a third option. The scanner beeps, images from the microfiche appearing on a large monitor. Technical diagrams, chemical formulas, testing data, the accumulated knowledge of Project Horizon preserved in miniature. He copied key research components, Margaret explains, studying the images. Not everything, there wasn't time, but enough that if necessary, the work could be reconstructed. Then Sentinel squad helped smuggle it out during the decommissioning, Frank continues. Each of us took different components, different pieces of the puzzle. The plan was to preserve it until a more favorable political climate emerged. And the other members of Sentinel squad? The ones in the photo? Frank's expression grows somber. Gone. Kavanaugh had a heart attack in '92. Wheeler disappeared in Belarus in '98. Likely FSB, but never confirmed. Chen died of cancer in 2005. Miller was killed in a car accident in 2017, though some of us have our doubts about how accidental it was. And William Reynolds? A noticeable tension enters the room at the mention of this name. Frank and Margaret exchange another glance, this one loaded with old complications. Colonel Reynolds was our commanding officer, Frank says carefully. He didn't approve of the contingency plan, believed we were violating our oaths by not following the termination orders to the letter. He threatened to report us, Margaret adds, her voice tight with old anger. Your father convinced him to give us 24 hours before taking action. That's when the incident happened. What incident? Frank sighs heavily, the weight of decades-old decisions evident in his posture. There was an explosion at the facility. Official record says it was an equipment malfunction during decommissioning. 3 technicians were killed. Reynolds was badly injured. And my father? He pulled Reynolds out, saved his life. But not before securing the final components of Project Horizon. After that, even Reynolds couldn't report us without implicating himself in the disaster. Margaret interjects, her voice clinical. The explosion was never fully explained. Theories ranged from sabotage by foreign operatives to deliberate action by someone trying to destroy evidence. The journal on the workbench suddenly seems to exert a gravitational pull on Evelyn's attention. She reaches for it, running her fingers over the leather binding that her father's hands once touched. And this contains what exactly? Your father's personal record of Project Horizon, his observations, concerns, insights that never made it into the official documentation, and most importantly, his moral reasoning for preserving the research despite direct orders to the contrary. Evelyn opens the journal carefully, the pages crackling slightly with age. Her father's precise handwriting fills each page, diagrams, equations, and lengthy narrative passages documenting not just scientific progress, but ethical considerations. He wanted you to understand why he did what he did, Frank says quietly. Not just the what, but the why. As Evelyn begins to read, Margaret turns her attention to the hard drive, connecting it to one of the computer systems through a specialized interface. This might take some time. The encryption is likely to be substantial. Frank focuses on the metal cylinder, carefully examining its seals and markings. Prototype containment vessel, still intact after all these years. Your father's engineering was always impeccable. The journal's early entries detail the formation of Project Horizon, the initial goals, the assembled team, the promising early results. But as Evelyn reads further, she finds her father documenting increasing concerns about external pressures on the project. April 18, 1975, she reads aloud. Second visit this month from private sector observers. Ostensibly here to evaluate military applications, but their questions focus exclusively on commercialization potential. Weston from DOE seems uncomfortable with their access level. She flips forward several pages. September 30th, 1975. Breakthrough in catalyst efficiency. Henderson believes we've solved the scaling problem. Implementation now theoretically possible at both micro and macro levels. Funding suddenly increased by 30%, but with new oversight provisions that restrict publication paths. More pages turn. February 12th, 1976. Demonstration for Joint Chiefs canceled without explanation. Instead, representatives from Westfield Energy attended the quarterly review. Their technical questions were surprisingly detailed, suggesting prior knowledge of our work. Project classification level increased again. Frank nods grimly. The writing was on the wall by then. Private interests were circling, recognizing the commercial implications. Military applications were becoming secondary to profit potential. May 4th, 1976. Evelyn continues reading. Termination notice received. 48 hours to cease all operations. Pack all materials for secure storage. Team devastated. Henderson threatened to go public, had to talk him down. Something isn't right about this. Called Frank to discuss contingencies. Margaret looks up from her work with the hard drive. That was when your father activated the backup plan. He'd been preparing for the possibility for months, establishing secure locations, communication protocols, extraction routes. May 6, 1976. Evelyn reads, her voice catching slightly. Last day at Sierra 9. Reynolds suspicious, watching closely. Sentinel squad officially here to supervise security, but Frank and the others understand the real mission. Split the research components as planned. Each man takes a piece, no one has the whole picture. Safety and distribution. She turns the page, finding a hastily written entry in a hand less controlled than her father's usual precise script. May 7, 1976. Explosion during final shutdown procedures. 3 dead. Reynolds injured but stable. Official investigation launched, but I know what they'll find, or rather what they won't. The components are secure. God forgive me if what we've done caused this. But the work was too important to lose. Some innovations belong to humanity, not to corporate balance sheets or military arsenals. The room falls silent as Evelyn processes the implications of what she's reading. Her father, the straight-arrow military man she'd known, had been part of what amounted to a conspiracy to preserve classified research against official orders. Had people died because of his actions? Or was the explosion truly an accident, a tragic coincidence that provided cover for their operation? Before she can voice these questions, Margaret calls their attention to her monitor. I've accessed the drive. It's a complete technical archive of Project Horizon. All test data, all prototypes, all applications research. Your father was thorough. What exactly was this project? Evelyn asks, the question that's been building since they first opened the buried container. What was so revolutionary that it needed to be preserved this way? Frank moves to the metal cylinder, carefully beginning the process of opening its sophisticated seals. Project Horizon developed what they called a perpetual catalytic energy cell. In simple terms, a power generation system that could produce electricity using common elements through a revolutionary catalytic process. The implications were extraordinary, Margaret continues. A single cell the size of a car battery could power a house indefinitely. Scaled up, it could power a city. The military applications were obvious: forward bases that didn't need fuel supply lines, vehicles that never needed refueling, communication systems that could operate indefinitely in remote locations. But the civilian applications were what really mattered, Frank adds, and what scared certain interests. Imagine energy independence, not just for countries, but for individuals. No more power grids, no more oil dependency, no more resource wars. That would have changed everything, Evelyn says, beginning to understand the magnitude of what her father had helped create, and why powerful interests might have wanted it suppressed. Which is precisely why it was shut down, Margaret confirms. The official reason was security concerns and unproven technology stability. The real reason was that trillions of dollars in energy infrastructure and future profits were suddenly at risk. The final seal on the cylinder releases with a soft hiss. Frank removes the cap with reverent care, then gently extracts what appears to be a metal and ceramic device approximately the size of a soda can. Despite decades in storage, it gleams as if newly manufactured, its surface etched with circuit-like patterns that seem to catch and reflect light in unusual ways. "This is it?" Evelyn asks, somehow expecting something more visually impressive, given its supposedly revolutionary capabilities. "This is it," Frank confirms. "A prototype catalytic cell. According to your father's notes, it should still be functional. It was designed to last essentially forever, barring physical damage." "Does it work?" Frank carefully places the device on a testing platform connected to measurement equipment. "Let's find out." Margaret's fingers move across a keyboard, activating diagnostic systems. Sensors extend toward the device, taking readings without physical contact. Data begins to flow across the monitors. Energy signatures, output metrics, stability indicators. "My God," Margaret whispers, studying the results. "It's still active. After all these years in storage, the output is exactly as the specifications predicted. It's perfect." So this is what my father risked everything to preserve. A better way to generate power. Frank shakes his head slightly. "Not just power, Ms. Hart. Freedom. Energy independence means political independence, economic independence, strategic independence. This technology doesn't just change how we power our devices, it changes the balance of global power itself." The implications hang in the air like smoke. Too substantial to ignore, too diffuse to grasp fully. Evelyn stares at the unassuming device, trying to reconcile its physical modesty with its world-changing potential. So what now? We've found it. We've confirmed it works. What was my father's endgame? What are we supposed to do with this? That's where things get complicated, Frank admits. The original plan was to preserve the research until classification expired, then work through proper government channels to resurrect the project. But that was 50 years ago. The world is different now. The threats are different. Michael's journal should contain his contingency instructions, Margaret suggests. He would have left guidance for whoever recovered the research. Evelyn returns to the journal, flipping toward the back pages. The final entries are dated weeks after the Sierra 9 incident, written in her father's study at home, the same room where she had played as a child, unaware of the secrets being documented mere feet away. June 23, 1976, she reads, "Final provisions made, components secured, Sentinel squad briefed on need-to-know basis. If anything happens to me, Frank knows the protocols. When the time is right, when the political climate allows, Project Horizon can be resurrected, not for profit, not for military advantage, but for humanity." She turns to the final page, finding a handwritten letter rather than a journal entry. "To whoever recovers this research, if you're reading this, you've been entrusted with a responsibility that transcends ordinary notions of duty or ownership. Project Horizon represents not just scientific achievement, but moral obligation. This technology belongs to humanity, not to nations or corporations. It must be shared, not monopolized, protected, not weaponized. The power to liberate can also be the power to control, depending on whose hands hold it. Choose the path of liberation. I did." The words hang in the air, a final testament from a man who had carried secrets to his grave, who had made difficult choices in service to a principle larger than himself. Evelyn feels the weight of inheritance, not just of physical objects, but of moral purpose. Before they can discuss next steps, an alert sounds from the security system. Margaret moves swiftly to a monitoring station, activating exterior cameras. The displays show 3 black SUVs approaching the ranch along the access road, their movement deliberate and coordinated. "Company," she announces tersely. "Same vehicle profile as your visitors at the structure. But how did they find this location?" Frank's expression hardens. "Only one way. We have a leak. Or we've been tracked." All eyes turn to Evelyn, the newcomer to their circle of secrecy. She raises her hands defensively. "I haven't told anyone about any of this. I didn't even know about any of this until yesterday." "Not intentionally, perhaps," Margaret says, studying another monitor. "But technology makes secrets harder to keep. Check your phone, your belongings." Evelyn empties her pockets onto the workbench. Phone, keys, wallet. Frank examines each item with professional thoroughness, finally holding up her keyring. Attached to it is a small medallion commemorating the Hart's Auto 50th anniversary, a gift from the Fairhaven Chamber of Commerce years ago. "This isn't original to the key ring," he observes, studying it closely. "The metal is different, newer." He pries at the edge with a precision tool, and the medallion splits open, revealing a sophisticated micro-tracker nestled within. "Someone's been planning this for a long time," Margaret says grimly. "That's military-grade tech, not commercial. Probably activated when you left the garage." "But who would—" Evelyn begins, then stops as realization dawns. "Dylan, the new mechanic. His arrival was too convenient." "We can discuss betrayal later," Frank interrupts, gathering the Project Horizon materials. Right now we need to move. The workshop has an emergency exit. We take the research and go dark." "Go dark where exactly?" Evelyn demands. "And for how long? I have a business, a life. I can't just disappear because of something my father did 49 years ago." "You can if the alternative is letting Project Horizon fall into the wrong hands," Margaret counters, already powering down systems and initiating what appears to be a data purge protocol. "Your father understood the stakes. That's why he created all these contingencies." Evelyn feels the situation spiraling beyond her control. A simple act of kindness to a veteran has cascaded into a covert operation with her at its center. This isn't her world. These aren't her secrets. Yet here she is, suddenly responsible for a technology that could change the course of human civilization. "Wait," she says, a sudden thought striking her. "The agents who came to the garage, they asked about Sierra 9 specifically. They already know about the project. They know what we have." Frank pauses in his preparations, considering this. It's been half a century. Classification expired. Someone in the government must have connected the dots, realized what your father's unit was really doing there. "But that doesn't make sense," Margaret interjects. "If this were a legitimate government recovery operation, they'd have proper channels, proper authorization. They wouldn't be sending unmarked vehicles and operating like this." The security system chimes again. The vehicles are now at the perimeter fence. Time is running out. "What if," Evelyn says slowly, pieces falling into place, "what if this isn't about recovering the technology at all? What if it's about making sure it stays buried?" Frank and Margaret exchange glances, the possibility clearly resonating with their Cold War experiences. "Wouldn't be the first time," Frank acknowledges. "Some secrets are worth killing to protect, especially ones with trillion-dollar implications." "So who's behind it?" Evelyn presses. "Who benefits from making sure Project Horizon never sees the light of day?" "The usual suspects," Margaret replies bitterly. "Energy conglomerates, defense contractors, anyone with a vested interest in the status quo." "We need to know who we're dealing with before we run," Evelyn insists. "Otherwise, we're just reacting, not acting. My father didn't preserve this research just for it to be buried again." And Frank studies her for a moment, recognizing Michael Hart's stubborn determination in his daughter's eyes. "What do you suggest?" "Let me see what they want, face to face. If they're legitimate government agents, I turn over what they're legally entitled to. If not, we'll have better information for our next move." "Too risky," Margaret objects. "If they're here to eliminate loose ends, you'd be walking right into their crosshairs." "Not if I don't bring the research with me," Evelyn counters. "Not if you two are watching, ready to intervene if things go sideways. Not if we control the engagement." Frank considers this, tactical options clearly running through his mind. "It could work, give us valuable intelligence on who we're dealing with, but you'd be the one at risk, Ms. Hart." "It's my legacy," Evelyn says simply. "My father trusted me with this. I need to understand exactly what this is." After a moment of tense silence, Frank nods. "We do it your way. But with precautions. Margaret, activate Watchdog Protocol. I'll take position on the south ridge with the long-range equipment. Ms. Hart, you meet them at the front porch in full view. No invitation to enter. Keep them talking. Get them to reveal as much as possible." "What about the research materials?" Margaret is already securing the items in a specialized case. "Hidden panic room, accessible only from in here. If things go bad, we rendezvous at Fallback Point Charlie in 24 hours. Frank hands Evelyn a small earpiece, nearly invisible once in place. "We'll be monitoring. If you hear Sunset Protocol, drop to the ground immediately. Understood?" Evelyn nods, adrenaline now overriding fear. This isn't her world, but she's adapting to it with surprising speed. Perhaps her father's daughter, after all. "Remember," Frank says as they prepare to separate, "these people have been searching for Project Horizon for decades. They're not going to walk away empty-handed. Your job isn't to convince them to leave. It's to find out who they really are and what they really want. And if they decide I know too much?" Frank's expression is grim but resolute. "Then they'll have to go through me. Your father saved my life twice. I still owe him one. Minutes later, Evelyn stands alone on the weathered front porch of the ranch house, watching as 3 black SUVs pull into the yard. The vehicles form a semicircle, headlights illuminating her position with uncomfortable brightness. For a moment, no one emerges, as if evaluating whether this solitary figure represents a threat or an opportunity. Finally, doors open on the lead vehicle. 2 men in suits emerge, familiar faces from her garage, Agents Wilson and Taylor. They approach with professional caution, stopping at the base of the porch steps. Behind them, other figures remain near the vehicles, postures suggesting readiness rather than relaxation. "Ms. Hart," Wilson calls, his tone carefully neutral. "Carefully, this is an unexpected location for our next meeting." "I could say the same, Agent Wilson, if that's really your name. Seems like a lot of resources for a routine follow-up on declassified operations." Taylor steps forward slightly. "Where's Bowers? We know he's with you." "Running an errand. I'm sure he'll be back shortly. Why don't you tell me what this is really about while we wait, because I'm starting to think this has very little to do with historical documentation." Wilson's expression reveals nothing, but his next words shift the conversation's territory. "We know you've recovered materials from Sierra 9, materials that legally belong to the United States government. We're authorized to take possession of those materials immediately." "Authorized by whom, exactly? You still haven't properly identified which agency you represent." "That information is classified." "Convenient. But since you mentioned Sierra 9, what exactly do you think I have?" "Project Horizon research components. Specifically, prototype catalytic cell technology removed from the facility prior to official decommissioning. Technology that represents a significant national security concern." Evelyn leans against the porch railing, projecting a casualness she doesn't feel. National security concern. Interesting choice of words for clean energy technology developed half a century ago. A flicker of surprise crosses Taylor's face before he masks it. "So you are aware of the technology's nature?" "I'm aware of many things, Agent Taylor, including the fact that Project Horizon was abruptly terminated not for security reasons, but because it threatened certain powerful economic interests." Wilson's posture stiffens slightly. "Ms. Hart, I don't think you appreciate the seriousness of your situation. You're in possession of classified military technology. Your cooperation now will determine whether this ends with simple recovery or with obstruction charges. Obstruction charges from an unidentified agency pursuing technology that's been declassified for years? I'd be interested to see how that plays in court or in the press." At the mention of press, both agents exchange glances. In her ear, Frank's voice is barely a whisper. "Good. Push that angle. See how they react." "Let's be reasonable," Wilson says, his tone shifting to conciliatory. "We understand your father believed he was acting patriotically. We're not here to tarnish his legacy or pursue charges against his memory. We simply need to recover sensitive technology for proper evaluation and potential implementation." "Implementation?" Evelyn seizes on the word. "So the government is finally interested in alternative energy solutions that don't involve fossil fuels? Seems like a rather dramatic change in policy." Taylor steps forward, clearly losing patience. "Enough games, Ms. Hart. We know the materials are here. We have authorization to search these premises with or without your cooperation." "Do you have a warrant? I'd like to see it." "National security exemptions apply in this case." "Convenient again. So not really Department of Defense then, because DoD operates under actual laws, with actual oversight." Wilson's hand moves slightly toward his jacket, a subtle gesture, but one that raises immediate alarm bells. "Ms. Hart, for the final time, where are the Project Horizon materials?" "I think," comes a new voice from behind the agents, "that the lady has made it clear she's not interested in cooperating with unidentified individuals making unsubstantiated claims." All heads turn to see a black SUV that has somehow approached unnoticed during their conversation. Standing beside it is an older man in an immaculately tailored suit, his silver hair and bearing projecting authority without effort. Behind him, 4 individuals in tactical gear stand at ready positions, professional security, clearly military trained. Wilson and Taylor both straighten, recognition and surprise evident in their postures. "Colonel Reynolds," Wilson acknowledges, his tone suddenly formal. "We weren't aware you were involved in this operation." The name hits Evelyn like a physical blow. Reynolds. William Reynolds, the Sentinel squad commander who had opposed her father's plan to preserve Project Horizon. The man injured in the Sierra 9 explosion. The man who, by all accounts, should have been their adversary, not their ally. In her ear, Frank's voice is urgent. "Sunset Protocol, now!" Evelyn drops to the porch floor just as the night erupts into chaos. Shots ring out, precise, controlled fire from the ridge where Frank positioned himself. 2 of the unidentified operatives by the original SUVs fall immediately. Wilson and Taylor dive for cover, weapons appearing in their hands with practiced speed. Reynolds and his security team respond with disciplined precision, establishing a defensive perimeter while returning fire toward the agents who supposedly share their government affiliation. The contradiction is clear. These are not 2 branches of the same operation, but opposing forces who have collided in their pursuit of Project Horizon. From her position on the porch, Evelyn watches in stunned disbelief as American government agents engage in a firefight on U.S. soil. Whatever Project Horizon represents, it's valuable enough to shatter normal protocols and chains of command. The shooting stops as abruptly as it began. Wilson and Taylor have retreated to their vehicles, engines roaring to life. Reynolds' security team maintains covering positions, weapons trained on the departing SUVs. Only when the vehicles have disappeared down the access road does Reynolds approach the porch, his expression grave but composed. "Ms. Hart," he says, extending a hand to help her up. "I apologize for the dramatic introduction. I'm William Reynolds, former commander of Sentinel Squad, and I believe we have a great deal to discuss about your father's legacy." Evelyn accepts his hand with reluctance, rising to her feet as Frank's voice comes through the earpiece again. "Stay calm. Play along. I'm coming to you." "Colonel Reynolds," she acknowledges, studying the man her father had written about, once an adversary, now apparently an ally. "You're the last person I expected to see here." "I imagine so. Michael and I had our differences, significant ones. But time has a way of clarifying perspective." He gestures toward the ranch house. "May we speak inside? There are things you need to know about Project Horizon, things not even your father was aware of." Before Evelyn can respond, Frank emerges from the tree line, rifle in hand, approach cautious but direct. Reynolds turns, unsurprised by his appearance. "Sergeant Bowers, still watching Michael's back, all these years later." "Old habits, Colonel. Like your habit of showing up exactly when the situation is at its most complicated." Reynolds' expression suggests old history between the men, not entirely friendly, but founded on mutual respect. "The timing wasn't my choice. When our monitoring systems detected unauthorized access to Sierra 9 material, I had to act." "Monitoring systems?" Evelyn interjects. "You've been tracking Project Horizon all this time?" "Not just tracking, Ms. Hart. Protecting. Please, inside. This conversation shouldn't happen in the open, even here." Frank and Reynolds assess each other for a long moment, decades of history and unspoken complexities passing between them. Finally, Frank nods slightly. "Margaret's still below. She should be part of this conversation." "I hoped she might be. It's been a long time." The group moves inside, an uneasy alliance formed by circumstances none of them could have anticipated. As they enter the ranch house, Evelyn feels the weight of history pressing down, her father's choices, their consequences, and the responsibility that has now fallen to her. In the kitchen, Reynolds pauses, studying the concealed entrance to the workshop with what appears to be nostalgic recognition. Michael's design, always thorough, always forward-thinking. Frank activates the hidden switch, revealing the staircase once more. "Margaret," he calls down, "we have an unexpected development. Colonel Reynolds is here." A moment of silence follows, then Margaret's voice, tight with suppressed emotion. Send him down, alone. Reynolds nods, accepting the terms. Before descending, he turns to Evelyn. Your father was right about many things, Ms. Hart, but not everything. What happens next depends on whether you're willing to consider that he might have been operating without all the facts. As Reynolds disappears below, Frank moves to the window, keeping watch on the perimeter where Reynolds' security team has established defensive positions. I never thought I'd see the day, he murmurs, almost to himself. What exactly is happening here? Evelyn demands. Reynolds was supposed to be the one who opposed my father, the one who wanted Project Horizon buried. Now he shows up saving us from government agents? None of this makes sense. Frank turns from the window, his expression troubled. In our line of work, Ms. Hart, things were rarely what they seemed on the surface. Your father believed Reynolds was following orders to shut down Project Horizon. Reynolds believed your father was compromising national security by preserving the research. And now? Now I think we're about to learn that both of them might have been wrong about certain aspects of the situation. The question is whether that changes what we should do with Project Horizon today. From below, raised voices can be heard. Margaret and Reynolds engaged in what sounds like an intense disagreement. The words are indistinct, but the emotions are clear. Old wounds being reopened, old arguments revisited. They were close once, Frank explains, noting Evelyn's questioning look. Before Sierra 9, before everything went sideways. The voices fall silent. Minutes later, footsteps on the stairs announce their return. Margaret emerges first, her expression a complex mixture of anger, resignation, and something that might be reluctant respect. Reynolds follows, carrying a file folder that wasn't with him when he descended. Ms. Hart, Reynolds addresses Evelyn directly, I believe it's time you learned what Project Horizon really was. Not just what your father believed it to be. He places the folder on the kitchen table, opening it to reveal documents bearing classification stamps and security watermarks that even decades later convey their original importance. Project Horizon began as an alternative energy research initiative, Reynolds explains. Everything your father told you about that aspect is true. The scientists did develop a revolutionary catalytic energy cell. It was efficient, sustainable, potentially world-changing. But, Evelyn prompts, sensing the critical turn coming, but what your father never knew, what none of Sentinel Squad knew except me, was that the catalytic process had an unexpected property discovered late in the research cycle. Under certain conditions, the reaction could be modified to produce something far more significant than electricity. Which was? Frank asks, tension evident in his voice. Reynolds meets his gaze directly. A controlled fusion reaction. Clean, sustainable nuclear power without radioactive waste, without uranium, without the need for massive containment facilities. The implications hang in the air like smoke, too momentous to process immediately. If true, this wasn't just an alternative energy source. It was the energy source, the holy grail that scientists had been pursuing for decades. That's not possible, Margaret objects. The technical barriers to sustained fusion were solved by accident, Reynolds interrupts. The Project Horizon team created a catalytic process that inadvertently overcame the containment problem that had stymied fusion research for decades. They didn't even realize what they'd done because they were focused on the direct electrical output, not the underlying reaction dynamics. Evelyn struggles to keep up with the technical aspects, focusing instead on the human implications. If that's true, why terminate the project? Why bury something so revolutionary? Reynolds' expression grows grim. Because in the wrong hands, the same process that enables clean fusion can be modified to create something else entirely. A new class of weapon, one with no radioactive signature, no rare materials to track, and destructive capability beyond anything in our current arsenals. The room falls silent as the full weight of this revelation settles. Not just an energy source, but a potential weapon of unprecedented power. Suddenly, the stakes of their situation, the government agents, the decades of secrecy, the continued surveillance, make a terrible kind of sense. The scientists realized the dual-use potential too late, Reynolds continues. When they reported it up the chain, that's when everything changed. The military wanted to develop the weapons application. Energy department wanted the power generation. Intelligence community wanted it kept secret from potential adversaries. Corporate interests wanted it buried to protect existing energy infrastructure investments. And my father? Evelyn asks quietly. What did he want? Michael wanted what he always wanted. The right thing to be done for the right reasons. He believed the energy application should be developed for civilian use with safeguards against weaponization. But in 1976, with the Cold War still very much active, that wasn't a viable option, not to those making the decisions. Frank leans forward, skepticism evident in his posture. If what you're saying is true, why are you telling us now? You opposed Michael's plan to preserve the research. You were going to report us for removing materials from Sierra 9. Reynolds nods, acknowledging the apparent contradiction. I did oppose him, because I knew the full scope of what Project Horizon had created, not just the energy application. I believed then that the technology was too dangerous to exist outside secure government control. And now? Margaret presses. Now I believe your father may have been right after all, Ms. Hart, Reynolds says, addressing Evelyn directly. The world has changed. The threats have changed, and after 50 years of watching our government repeatedly prioritize short-term interests over long-term security, I've come to believe that Project Horizon may be too important to leave solely in government hands. The revelation lands like a thunderclap. Reynolds, the by-the-book commander, the man who had opposed her father's actions on principle, now suggesting that the government he served for decades might not be the right steward for this technology. Those men at the structure, at the ranch, they weren't official Department of Defense, were they? Evelyn asks, pieces falling into place. Westfield Consulting Group, Reynolds confirms. Private military contractors with ties to energy conglomerates. They've been searching for Project Horizon materials for years, ever since classification expired and rumors began to circulate about what really happened at Sierra 9. And you've been what, exactly? Running counter-surveillance all this time? Reynolds' expression suggests the weight of decades spent in silent vigilance. After the Sierra 9 incident, I was assigned to oversee security for all materials related to Project Horizon. Official position was that everything had been contained, all research secured in government vaults. But I knew better. I knew what your father and Sentinel squad had done. So you've been protecting us all these years? Frank asks, disbelief evident in his tone. Protecting the research, Reynolds clarifies. Ensuring it didn't fall into the wrong hands, either private interests who would bury it forever or rogue elements who would weaponize it immediately. Waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances. And now is that moment? Margaret asks skeptically. Why now, after 50 years? Reynolds turns to Evelyn, his expression grave but resolute. Because Ms. Hart is now in possession of the complete Project Horizon research, because Westfield has identified her as the key to finding it, and because the window of opportunity to make the right choice is closing rapidly. What right choice? Evelyn demands, feeling the weight of responsibility settling more heavily with each revelation. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing we finish what your father started, Reynolds says simply, not by keeping Project Horizon buried, not by turning it over to government agencies who would prioritize weapons applications, but by releasing the energy technology to the world while simultaneously exposing the potential for weaponization, creating a situation where global transparency becomes the ultimate safeguard. Frank and Margaret exchange glances. The proposal is radical, dangerous, potentially world-changing, and completely counter to everything they would have expected from William Reynolds, the military man who had once been prepared to report them for unauthorized removal of classified materials. Why should we trust you? Frank asks bluntly. After Sierra 9, after the explosion I had nothing to do with, Reynolds interrupts, an edge of old anger in his voice. I opposed Michael's plan, yes. I believed he was making a dangerous mistake, but I would never have risked lives to stop him. Then who caused the explosion? Evelyn asks. If not you, Not my father. That, Reynolds says, grimly, is the question that has haunted me for 50 years. Someone wanted Project Horizon buried completely, not just classified, not just controlled, but erased. Someone with enough influence to manipulate a military decommissioning operation, someone who nearly succeeded. The implications hang in the air: conspiracy at the highest levels, decades of surveillance and counter-surveillance, and now a convergence of forces around the technology her father had helped create and chosen to preserve. "And you think making Project Horizon public is the solution?" Margaret asks. "After all these years of keeping it secret?" "I think keeping it secret has only delayed the inevitable," Reynolds replies. "Sooner or later, someone will rediscover the principles independently. The science wasn't impossible, just ahead of its time. When that happens, I'd rather the world already knows both the promise and the peril, rather than having it controlled by whoever gets there first." Evelyn looks between these cold warriors, Frank, Margaret, Reynolds, who have carried the burden of Project Horizon for decades. Now that weight has passed to her, a legacy she never asked for, but cannot ignore. "My father believed this technology belonged to humanity," she says finally, "not to governments, not to corporations. If what you're saying is true, Colonel, then making it public might be the only way to honor that belief while preventing its weaponization." "It's not that simple," Margaret cautions. "Once this information is released, we can't control how it's used. The same research that creates clean energy could be modified by those with the right expertise to create weapons. Which is why we don't just dump the research online," Reynolds says. "We need a strategic approach. Key principles released to legitimate scientific organizations worldwide, simultaneously. Full disclosure of the weaponization potential to create immediate international oversight. A coordinated campaign that prevents any single entity from controlling the technology." "And you've been planning this? All these years?" Frank asks, still skeptical of Reynolds' conversion from opponent to ally. "Let's just say I've had time to consider various scenarios," Reynolds acknowledges, "and to position resources that could help implement them, if necessary." Before anyone can respond, a security alarm sounds, perimeter sensors indicating approaching vehicles. Reynolds moves swiftly to the window, checking a handheld device that displays security camera feeds. "Westfield teams," he confirms grimly. "Multiple vehicles, heavy personnel presence. They're not taking chances this time." "How did they find us again?" Evelyn demands. "I got rid of the tracker." "They likely tracked Reynolds," Margaret suggests, "or his security team's communications." Reynolds nods, accepting the possibility without defensiveness. "We need to move. Now. The workshop has an emergency exit that leads to an underground access tunnel. We can reach my backup transportation from there." "And go where?" Evelyn asks, the reality of their situation becoming clear. "They found us at the structure. They found us here. They'll keep coming until they get what they want." "Which is why we changed the equation," Reynolds says, his military mind clearly calculating options and contingencies. "We don't run indefinitely. We execute the disclosure protocol immediately. Once Project Horizon is public knowledge, pursuing us becomes pointless." "Public knowledge how, exactly?" Frank challenges. "We're about to be pinned down by private military contractors, not exactly optimal conditions for a coordinated global scientific disclosure." Reynolds' expression suggests he's been preparing for this moment for a very long time. "I have resources in place, secure servers, scientific contacts, media connections, everything needed to implement the disclosure protocol. But I need the complete Project Horizon research to do it." All eyes turn to Margaret, who holds the keys to the panic room where they secured the materials. She studies Reynolds for a long moment, decades of distrust warring with the immediate threat outside. "If we do this," she says finally, "there's no going back, for any of us." "There's been no going back since May 6, 1976, Reynolds replies quietly. "We just didn't all realize it at the time." The security alarm intensifies. The Westfield teams have reached the outer perimeter. Decisions must be made now, with incomplete information and uncertain outcomes. Evelyn thinks of her father, the man she thought she knew, and the man revealed through his journal and the testimony of his comrades. a man who made difficult choices based on principle, who understood that sometimes duty requires acting against orders when those orders conflict with deeper moral imperatives. "Get the research materials," she tells Margaret. "We go with Reynolds. We implement the disclosure. We finish what my father started." As Margaret moves to retrieve the Project Horizon components, Frank steps closer to Evelyn, his voice low and urgent. "Are you sure about this? Once we cross this line—" "I'm sure about one thing," Evelyn interrupts. "My father believed this technology could change the world for the better. He was willing to risk everything to preserve that possibility. I won't be the one who fails to see it through." Reynolds checks his device again, his expression tightening. Westfield teams deploying from vehicles, standard tactical approach pattern. We have maybe 3 minutes before they breach the house. "The research is secure," Margaret announces, returning with the specialized case containing the Project Horizon materials. "Workshop systems purged and wiped. Then we move. Now!" Reynolds leads them toward the concealed entrance to the emergency tunnel, another of her father's contingency measures, another piece of a legacy Evelyn never knew existed until days ago. As they descend into the darkness, leaving behind the life she knew for an uncertain future, driven by decisions made decades before her birth, Evelyn clutches her father's journal to her chest. Whatever happens next, she is now inextricably part of a story that began long ago in a classified facility called Sierra 9, a story of scientific discovery, moral choices, and the complex intersection of progress and power. Behind them, the first sounds of forced entry echo through the ranch house. Ahead, a tunnel leads to possibilities Evelyn can barely comprehend. She follows Reynolds, Frank, and Margaret into the darkness, carrying her father's legacy toward an uncertain dawn. The emergency tunnel beneath the ranch house extends for nearly half a mile, its concrete walls bearing the unmistakable precision of military engineering. Battery-powered safety lights activate automatically as they progress, illuminating a path that slopes gradually downward before leveling out. The air is cool and dry, preserved by ventilation systems hidden within the structure. My father built all this? For a contingency that might never happen? Your father understood preparation. He never left anything to chance. Especially not Project Horizon. The tunnel terminates at what appears to be a dead end, but Reynolds activates a hidden mechanism, causing a section of the wall to slide aside. Beyond lies a small underground garage containing a single vehicle, a modified Suburban with government plates, similar to Margaret's, but newer. Transportation secured through official channels, less conspicuous than private vehicles. Won't they be tracking government resources? They would, if this vehicle were still in the official system. It was decommissioned on paper 3 years ago, exists now only in the physical world, not the digital one. They load quickly, Reynolds taking the wheel while his security team remains behind to delay the Westfield forces. The Suburban accelerates up a concealed ramp that emerges seamlessly into a drainage culvert nearly a mile from the ranch house. From there, they access a county maintenance road, lights off, navigating by moonlight until they reach more established routes. "Where exactly are we going, Colonel?" "Secure communications facility near Sheridan. Military installation, officially decommissioned in 2005, unofficially maintained as a fallback position for certain classified operations." Another doesn't exist on paper situation? Precisely. From there, we can execute the disclosure protocol. Simultaneous release to multiple scientific bodies, media outlets, and oversight organizations worldwide. "And you've been planning this for how long?" Reynolds' eyes remain fixed on the road, but his expression suggests the weight of decades spent in vigilant preparation. "Since 1986, 10 years after Sierra 9, after I'd had time to process what happened there, what your father tried to do." "What changed your mind? You were ready to report Sentinel Squad for preserving the research." "Chernobyl changed my mind, Ms. Hart. Watching a nuclear disaster unfold, seeing the human cost of our existing energy technologies, realizing that Project Horizon could have prevented it entirely." Frank leans forward from the back seat. "That's a convenient narrative, Colonel. But There's more to it than that. Reynolds acknowledges this with a slight nod. There is. I also learned that certain elements within our own government had planned to weaponize Project Horizon exclusively, despite official policy stating both energy and defense applications would be developed in parallel. The energy component was never going to see the light of day. So my father was right all along. About the suppression, yes. About the best way to preserve the research. That remains to be seen. The road stretches before them, empty at this late hour. They've seen no signs of pursuit since leaving the ranch, but tension remains high in the vehicle. Margaret monitors communications channels on specialized equipment, scanning for any indication that their movements have been detected. How much farther to this facility? Another hour, assuming we maintain current speed and heading. Evelyn opens her father's journal again, studying entries she hadn't had time to fully absorb earlier. Certain passages take on new significance given Reynolds's revelations about the true nature of Project Horizon. My father suspected the fusion potential. Listen to this entry from February 1976. Henderson believes the anomalous energy readings during Test Series J indicate a previously unidentified reaction pathway. If confirmed, implications extend far beyond our current parameters. Meeting scheduled with Reynolds to discuss security protocols. He knew, or at least suspected. He suspected, Reynolds confirms, but by then it was too late. The decision to terminate had already been made at levels above any of us. Your father chose to preserve what he could rather than let it all be buried. And you chose to let him, despite your objections. You could have stopped Sentinel Squad. Could have reported them immediately. I gave them 24 hours. That was a compromise between duty and conscience. And then the explosion happened. Reynolds' grip on the steering wheel tightens perceptibly. Yes, and 3 good men died. Men under my command, under my protection. The unspoken question hangs in the air. Was the explosion truly an accident, or something more sinister? And if the latter, who was responsible? The timing had certainly been convenient for those who wanted Project Horizon to disappear completely. These men pursuing us, Westfield, you said they have connections to energy companies? Westfield Consulting Group provides security and intelligence services to major energy corporations. Officially, they're just another private military contractor. Unofficially, they're the enforcement arm for certain shared interests in the energy sector. And they want Project Horizon to bury it, permanently. They want the fusion component buried, the weaponization potential secured. They'd likely develop the basic energy technology eventually, but in a controlled, profit-maximizing manner. Frank makes a sound of disgust. 50 years later, same story. Corporate interests over human needs. It's more complicated than that, Reynolds counters. The weaponization potential is real. In the wrong hands, Project Horizon could create devastating weapons with minimal resources. That risk can't be dismissed as mere corporate paranoia. Evelyn considers this, weighing the competing claims on her father's legacy. Clean, unlimited energy for a world desperately in need of sustainable solutions. Potential weapons of unprecedented power. Corporate control versus public benefit. The calculus is impossible, the responsibility overwhelming. How can we be sure the disclosure protocol will work, that making this public won't just accelerate weaponization? We can't be certain, Reynolds admits. But history suggests that secrecy enables weaponization more effectively than transparency. When multiple nations, multiple scientific communities have access to the same information, mutual oversight becomes possible. That's a hell of a gamble, Colonel. The alternative is allowing Westfield and their backers to control the technology, to develop it in secret, for their own purposes. Is that what your father would have wanted? The question isn't merely rhetorical. In a very real sense, they are all executors of Michael Hart's will, interpreting his intentions, carrying forward his legacy under circumstances he couldn't have fully anticipated. My father wanted Project Horizon used for humanity's benefit. That much is clear from his journal. But he couldn't have known how the world would change in 50 years. The climate crisis, resource depletion, growing energy inequality. all problems that Project Horizon could help solve, Margaret points out, if properly implemented. And if improperly implemented? If the weaponization potential is realized first? Reynolds' expression is grave but resolved. Then humanity faces the same risk it has faced since 1945, the possibility that our technological capacity might outstrip our moral wisdom. But I believe that risk exists regardless of what we do with Project Horizon. The underlying physics won't remain undiscovered forever. The road rises, winding into the foothills of the Bighorn Mountains. They've left the plains behind, entering more rugged terrain where surveillance becomes more difficult and pursuit more challenging, but also where communication becomes more problematic, cell signals fading in and out as mountains interrupt transmission paths. We're being followed. Margaret's announcement cuts through the philosophical discussion, returning them sharply to immediate concerns. She adjusts settings on her monitoring equipment, confirming the assessment. 2 vehicles, maintaining distance, professional pursuit protocol. Westfield? Most likely. They would have anticipated our departure from the ranch, probably have multiple teams coordinating to track possible escape vectors. Reynolds adjusts their route, taking a sudden turn onto a smaller road that winds even higher into the mountains. Alternate approach to the facility. Longer, but with better defensive positions if we need to evade pursuit. The Suburban's engine strains against the grade, powerful but burdened by the weight of 5 passengers and their equipment. Behind them, headlights appear intermittently as their pursuers navigate the same winding route. They're gaining. Expected, their vehicles are likely lighter, more maneuverable. But we have the advantage of knowing exactly where we're going. Reynolds takes another turn, this one onto what appears to be a logging road, unpaved, rutted, barely maintained. The Suburban handles the terrain admirably, but their speed necessarily decreases. The pursuing vehicles will face the same challenges, but the gap continues to narrow. We won't reach the facility before they intercept us at this rate. Then we change the equation. Reynolds surveys the terrain ahead through the windshield, his military mind assessing options and possibilities. There's a fire watchtower 3 miles ahead, maintained by the Forest Service, has emergency communications equipment, defensive position, limited access routes. You're suggesting we make a stand there, against professional tactical teams? I'm suggesting we complete our mission there. The tower has satellite communication capabilities, sufficient to initiate the disclosure protocol. Not ideal, but functional. The decision point approaches with each passing minute, each mile covered. Continue to the original destination with pursuit closing, or divert to the watchtower, and attempt to complete the mission from a less optimal, but more immediately accessible location. The tower. We take our chances there. Reynolds nods, committing to the new plan. The Suburban accelerates as much as the rough road allows, jostling its occupants as it navigates around potholes and washouts. Behind them, the pursuing vehicles have appeared again, closer now, their drivers equally willing to sacrifice comfort for speed. The fire watchtower appears ahead, a steel structure rising above the tree line, its observation cabin perched atop a framework of cross-braced supports. A rough access road leads to its base, where a small equipment shed provides storage for maintenance supplies and emergency provisions. Reynolds brings the Suburban to a halt at the base of the tower, positioning it to provide some cover for their ascent. Tower first. Establish position. I'll bring the communications equipment. They exit the vehicle quickly, Frank assisting Margaret while Reynolds and Evelyn gather critical equipment. The pursuing vehicles are now visible on the road behind them, perhaps 2 minutes away. The climb up the tower's steel staircase is precarious. The steps narrow, the railings minimal, the height increasingly dizzying as they ascend. The observation cabin at the top is Spartan but functional, approximately 15 feet square, windows on all sides providing 360-degree visibility, basic amenities for a fire spotter's extended stay. Reynolds immediately moves to a locked cabinet, producing a key from a hidden compartment beneath the main console. Another contingency? Always have fallback positions, Ms. Hart. First rule of operational security. Ma, the cabinet contains communications equipment more sophisticated than would be expected in a standard fire watchtower, satellite uplink, encrypted transmission systems, backup power supplies. Reynolds begins activating these systems while Margaret establishes a defensive perimeter, positioning herself to monitor the approaching threat. They're here. 2 vehicles, 6 personnel visible, tactical deployment. Frank moves to another window, assessing the situation from a different angle. Standard 2-team approach, 1 to establish containment, 1 to execute entry. They're professionals. Can we hold them off long enough to complete the transmission? Reynolds is focused on the communications system, connecting the hard drive containing Project Horizon data to specialized interfaces. System boot sequence initiated. Satellite acquisition in progress. Estimated time to full transmission capability, 7 minutes. We don't have 7 minutes. Jiao. Below, the Westfield teams have established their initial positions, using their vehicles and the surrounding terrain for cover. Their movements are coordinated, disciplined, clearly military trained, likely with experience in similar extraction operations. They won't rush this, Frank observes. They want the research intact, want us alive if possible for intelligence purposes. That gives us some tactical advantages. As if to confirm his assessment, a voice calls up from below, amplified by some form of speaker system. Attention occupants, this is Westfield Security. We are authorized to recover classified government property in your possession. Surrender now and you will not be harmed. Authorized by whom exactly? Margaret mutters, her position unwavering. Certainly not any legitimate government entity. The standoff continues, a precarious balance of priorities and capabilities. The Westfield teams have superior numbers and firepower, but are constrained by their need to secure Project Horizon intact. The tower occupants have the defensive high ground and a clear mission objective, but limited resources and no extraction plan. Satellite link established, initializing disclosure protocol. Reynolds' announcement brings a moment of hope, progress toward their objective, despite the deteriorating tactical situation. The computer systems hum with activity, data being prepared for transmission to pre-established secure channels worldwide. 4 minutes to complete transmission sequence. Below, the Westfield teams have begun to move. One team maintains covering positions while the other advances toward the tower base, their movements suggesting they intend to breach the lower level and ascend the staircase. They're making their play. Frank positions himself at the top of the staircase, prepared to defend the single access point to their position. The narrow stairs create a natural choke point, limiting the attacker's ability to bring their superior numbers to bear effectively. 3 minutes to transmission. The lead Westfield operative reaches the base of the tower, beginning to ascend the metal stairs. Each step brings a metallic clang that resonates through the structure, marking their inexorable approach. Suddenly, the sound of rotors cuts through the tension, a helicopter approaching rapidly from the east, its running lights identifying it as likely military rather than civilian. All parties pause, reassessing the tactical situation with this new variable. "That's not Westfield," Reynolds observes, momentarily looking up from the communication console. "Wrong approach vector, wrong aircraft type. Friends of yours, Colonel?" "Not that I'm aware of." The helicopter circles once, powerful spotlights illuminating the scene below. The Westfield vehicles, their tactical teams, the tower with its defenders. A voice booms from the aircraft's external speakers. "Attention all personnel. This is the United States Army 7th Special Forces Group. The area is now under military jurisdiction. All civilians are ordered to stand down immediately." The announcement creates immediate confusion among the Westfield teams, their coordinated approach faltering as they reassess. Their communication systems activate as they presumably consult with their command structure about this unexpected development. "Military intervention? Now? That's a hell of a coincidence." Reynolds' expression shows genuine surprise. Whatever is happening, it wasn't part of his contingency planning. Transmission at 60%. 2 minutes remaining. The helicopter descends to a clear area approximately 50 yards from the tower, maintaining its spotlight coverage of the Westfield teams. The side door slides open, and soldiers in full tactical gear deploy, establishing a perimeter around the aircraft. One figure separates from the others, approaching the halfway point between the helicopter and the tower. Even from this distance, the insignia of a full-bird colonel is visible on his uniform. "This is Colonel Howard Reynolds, United States Army. I am ordering all private security personnel to stand down and withdraw from this area immediately. You are interfering with a classified military operation." The name hits Evelyn like a physical blow. Reynolds. Howard Reynolds. As in, your son? William Reynolds's hands pause momentarily on the keyboard, his expression unreadable. "Yes, my son." The pieces click into place. A connection Evelyn hadn't considered, hadn't even known to look for. Colonel Howard Reynolds, son of William Reynolds, now intervening in a situation his father had helped create decades ago. "Did you contact him? Arrange this?" "No, I've maintained operational security throughout. Howard has no knowledge of my involvement in this situation." Below, the Westfield teams have begun a tactical withdrawal, clearly unwilling to engage directly with U.S. military forces, regardless of their private contracts. Their vehicles start up, beginning to depart from the area while maintaining observation positions as long as possible. Transmission at 90%, 1 minute remaining. The Army team establishes a security cordon around the tower, their deployment professional and efficient. Colonel Howard Reynolds remains in position, waiting for some acknowledgement from the tower occupants. "Your son is here to secure Project Horizon, to take it back into military custody." Most likely, he would have been alerted when Westfield mobilized such significant resources, would have connected it to Sierra 9 based on his position and clearance level. And where does he stand on Project Horizon? On disclosure versus control? William Reynolds looks up from the console, his expression troubled but resolved. "I don't know. We haven't spoken about it. Haven't spoken about much of anything in years." The revelation adds yet another layer of complexity to an already Byzantine situation. Father and son, both military men, both connected to Project Horizon, now potentially on opposite sides of the decision about its future. Transmission complete. Disclosure protocol executed. Reynolds' announcement falls into a moment of silence, the culmination of decades of planning, of preservation, of waiting for the right moment. Project Horizon's technical specifications have now been transmitted to scientific bodies, oversight organizations, and media outlets worldwide. The process of disclosure has begun, irreversible and transformative. "We need to go down, meet with Howard's team, explain what we've done. And if they're here to secure Project Horizon for the same reasons it was buried 50 years ago, to control it rather than share it, then we're too late to stop them. But also too late for them to stop what we've set in motion." The descent from the tower is tense but unimpeded. The Army team maintains their positions, weapons at ready but not directly threatening. Colonel Howard Reynolds watches their approach, his expression professional but with an undercurrent of surprise as he recognizes his father among the group. "Colonel Reynolds! Colonel Reynolds!" Father and son regard each other across a gulf wider than the physical space between them. Years of strained relations, of different paths chosen, of secrets kept, and truths withheld. "Would you care to explain why you're interfering with the recovery of classified materials, sir?" The younger Reynolds keeps his tone formal, proper military protocol between officers regardless of their familial connection. But there's an edge beneath the formality, a tension born of personal history. "I'm afraid we've moved beyond classification concerns, Howard. Project Horizon has been disclosed." Disclosed? To whom?" "To everyone. Scientific community, media, oversight organizations, the full technical specifications, along with documentation of both energy and weaponization potential." Howard Reynolds' expression shifts from professional control to barely contained anger. "You had no authority to make that decision. Project Horizon remains under military jurisdiction regardless of classification timeline." "The decision was made 50 years ago, Colonel, by men who understood that some technologies transcend ordinary chains of command, men who believed that humanity deserved better than to have its future controlled by those with the most weapons or the deepest pockets. The younger Reynolds looks past his father to the others in the group, assessing, calculating. "You're Michael Hart's daughter, the mechanic from Fairhaven." "I am." "And you believe your father's actions were justified, removing classified military technology, concealing it for decades?" "I believe my father understood something that's still true today, that some innovations belong to humanity, not to governments or corporations. Project Horizon could help solve the energy crisis, address climate change, lift billions out of energy poverty, or it could create a new class of weapons. The choice isn't about the technology itself, it's about who gets to decide how it's used." Howard Reynolds' attention returns to his father, his expression hardening. "You've compromised national security, violated your oath. And for what? Some idealistic notion that public disclosure is better than proper governmental oversight?" "I violated one oath to honor a deeper one, Howard, the oath every soldier takes to protect the American people. Sometimes that protection requires difficult choices." The tension between them is palpable. Decades of disagreement crystallized in this moment of confrontation. But beneath the professional disagreement, personal history intrudes. A father and son who took different paths, who understood duty and honor in fundamentally different ways. You knew about this all along, didn't you? About what really happened at Sierra 9. About what Captain Hart and Sentinel Squad did. "I knew." "And you protected them. Protected the research all these years." "I did what I believed was necessary. What I still believe was necessary." Howard Reynolds absorbs this, reconciling the father he thought he knew with the man standing before him. A man who had carried secrets for half a century, who had made choices that defied conventional understanding of military duty. You should know that Westfield isn't operating under any legitimate authority. They're private contractors working for energy conglomerates who identified Project Horizon through declassified references. My team intercepted their communications when they mobilized significant resources in this region. "And your orders regarding Project Horizon?" "To secure any recovered materials and return them to proper military custody, to prevent unauthorized disclosure or exploitation." "Too late for that, I'm afraid. The disclosure is done. The research is public now. The question is what happens next." Howard Reynolds considers this, military training warring with the new reality before him. "I still have orders, sir. Orders that don't account for the situation you've created." "Then perhaps it's time for you to make the same choice I made 50 years ago, Howard. The choice between following orders and doing what you believe is right." The moment stretches between them, father and son, both military men, both bound by oaths of service, yet faced with circumstances that test the limits of those commitments. Around them, the Army team maintains their positions, awaiting direction from their commander. "What exactly did you disclose, sir? The complete Project Horizon specifications?" "The energy application technical details, the fusion process mechanics, and documentation regarding the weaponization potential with sufficient technical omissions to prevent direct weapons development from the disclosed materials. A compromise position, the best balance we could achieve between public benefit and security concerns." Howard Reynolds processes this, his tactical mind assessing implications and possibilities. "And the original materials? The prototype device?" William Reynolds gestures to the specialized case Margaret carries, the container holding the physical components of Project Horizon, including the prototype catalytic cell. "Still secured, still intact, and still rightfully under appropriate governmental jurisdiction. We preserved the research, Howard. We didn't steal it." "That's a fine distinction, sir, but an important one. We didn't want Project Horizon for ourselves. We wanted to ensure it wouldn't be buried forever or weaponized exclusively. The disclosure achieves that goal. What happens with the physical materials now is secondary." Another helicopter appears on the horizon, larger than the first, likely transport rather than tactical. Howard Reynolds glances toward it, then back to his father and the others. That would be my commanding officer, along with representatives from the Department of Energy and the National Security Council. They'll have questions. Many questions. I imagine they will, and will answer them, truthfully and completely. Including the consequences? Including the consequences. As the second helicopter approaches, a new tension settles over the group. The immediate tactical situation has been resolved, but the larger implications of what they've done are only beginning to unfold. Project Horizon is now in the public domain, its potential for both benefit and harm exposed to the light after decades in darkness. For what it's worth, Howard, I'm sorry it came to this. Sorry I couldn't find a way to include you in the decision. We've disagreed about many things over the years, sir. About duty, about country, about what it means to serve. I'm not sure this would have been any different. Perhaps not, but you deserve the chance to make your own choice, as I did all those years ago. The second helicopter lands, disgorging its passengers, senior military officials and civilian authorities whose expressions suggest they understand, at least partially, the magnitude of what has occurred. Howard Reynolds straightens, preparing to report to his superiors, to explain a situation that defies easy explanation. Whatever happens next, I want you to know something, Howard. I've always been proud of you, proud of the officer you've become, even when we disagreed. Something shifts in the younger Reynolds' expression, a momentary softening, a glimpse of the sun beneath the soldier. I know, Dad. I've always known that. The approaching officials create a boundary between personal reconciliation and professional responsibility. Howard Reynolds returns to full military bearing, moving to intercept his superiors, to begin the process of explaining what can be explained about Project Horizon and the choices that led to this moment. William Reynolds watches his son go, decades of distance compressed into these brief moments of connection and understanding. Beside him, Evelyn stands with her father's journal still clutched in her hands, the weight of 2 generations' choices resting on her shoulders. Is it really over, just like that? The immediate crisis, perhaps, but what we've set in motion today will continue for years, decades. Project Horizon will reshape scientific research, energy policy, international relations. That journey is just beginning. And what happens to us? To you, Frank? Margaret? To me? That depends partly on how Howard and his colleagues handle the situation, on whether they recognize that attempting to contain what's already been released would be futile and counterproductive. And if they don't, Reynolds' expression suggests he's considered this possibility thoroughly, then we've still accomplished what we set out to do. Project Horizon is now part of humanity's shared knowledge. Whatever consequences we face personally, that achievement remains. The officials have reached Howard Reynolds, their conversation animated but controlled. Documents are exchanged, communications devices activated. The process of governmental response has begun, bureaucracy confronting a situation that transcends ordinary protocols and procedures. Your father would be proud, Ms. Hart, not just of what we've done today, but of how you've carried his legacy forward, of the choices you've made when confronted with an impossible situation. Evelyn watches the activity around the helicopters, the ordered chaos of military and governmental systems adapting to new information, new realities. I'm still not sure I made the right choice, that any of us did. That's the burden of meaningful decisions, I'm afraid. Certainty is a luxury rarely afforded to those who must act when the stakes are highest. A figure separates from the group by the helicopters, Howard Reynolds, returning with what appears to be new instructions, new parameters for the unfolding situation. His expression is composed, but with an undertone of something unexpected, not anger or disappointment, but something approaching respect. My commanding officer has been in communication with the Joint Chiefs. They've been receiving reports of the Project Horizon disclosure from multiple sources, scientific organizations, media outlets, foreign governments. The disclosure protocol was comprehensive, as intended. Indeed, Howard Reynolds' tone suggests professional acknowledgement rather than approval. I've been instructed to secure the physical components and escort all of you to a debriefing facility in Colorado. You will not be detained, but your full cooperation is expected. And after the debriefing? That remains to be determined. But I've been assured that your actions will be evaluated in full context, including the historical circumstances surrounding Project Horizon and its suppression. William Reynolds exchanges glances with Frank and Margaret, companions in a decades-long journey that has finally reached its culmination. We'll cooperate fully, Colonel. We have nothing to hide. Not anymore. As they prepare to board the helicopters, Evelyn takes a final moment to look out across the Wyoming landscape. The rugged mountains, the vast spaces, the land her father had loved and protected in his own way. The land where he had hidden a secret that could change the world, entrusting its eventual discovery to the daughter who had never fully known him in life. What happens to Hart's auto, to my life in Fairhaven? That will be your choice, Ms. Hart. Once the debriefing is complete, once the initial disclosure phase has stabilized, your father preserved Project Horizon so that future generations would have choices he was denied, including you. The helicopter rotors begin to spin, creating artificial wind that whips across the mountaintop. The Westfield teams have completely withdrawn. Their mission failed, their purpose now obsolete. Project Horizon belongs to the world now, for better or worse. As they board the aircraft, Evelyn clutches her father's journal and the bronze star that had started this journey, physical connections to a man she thought she knew and now understands in ways she never imagined possible, a man who had seen beyond his time, who had made difficult choices in service to principles larger than himself. Ready, Ms. Hart? As ready as anyone can be, Colonel. The helicopters lift off, carrying them away from the fire watchtower, away from the Wyoming wilderness that had kept Project Horizon's secrets for nearly 50 years. Below, the landscape unfolds, mountains giving way to foothills, foothills to plains, an American tapestry that had shaped generations of hearts and their understanding of duty, of legacy, of what it means to serve something greater than oneself. In her mind, Evelyn returns to the garage in Fairhaven, to the wall of photographs showing 4 generations of Harts in uniform. Her grandfather, her father, her brother. All of them carrying pieces of the American story, visible and invisible, acknowledged and secret. And now her, the one who hadn't answered the call to service in the traditional way, yet found herself completing a mission begun before she was born. The Bronze Star medal rests in her palm, no longer a mysterious artifact but a symbol of recognition, of sacrifice, of choices made when duty and conscience pointed in different directions. Her father had earned it not just for bravery in combat, but for the courage to stand by his principles when doing so carried profound personal risk. He was right, you know, Reynolds says quietly as the helicopter carries them toward an uncertain future. Your father. About Project Horizon. About what it could mean for humanity, about the responsibility that comes with such knowledge. I think I'm beginning to understand that, beginning to understand him. Below, America passes beneath them, cities and towns, highways and back roads, the infrastructure of a nation built on ideals, sometimes realized, sometimes betrayed, always strived for. Somewhere down there, the first reports of Project Horizon are beginning to emerge, scientists receiving technical specifications that will transform their understanding of energy production, journalists piecing together the story of a Cold War secret finally brought to light, ordinary citizens about to learn that the future might be brighter than they imagined. What do you think happens next with Project Horizon? That's no longer for us to decide. We've done our part. Preserved the knowledge, prevented its weaponization, ensured its public disclosure. What humanity chooses to do with it now? That's the next chapter of the story. As the helicopter continues eastward, Evelyn opens her father's journal one last time, finding an entry she hadn't noticed before, a personal note written not as scientific documentation, but as a message to whoever might eventually recover his legacy. To the finder of this journal, whether you are my daughter or someone who comes after, know that the choices we make echo beyond our own time. Project Horizon represents both promise and peril, as does all human knowledge. I choose to believe in promise. I choose to trust that future generations will use this knowledge wisely, will recognize that some gifts belong not to nations or armies or corporations, but to humanity itself. If you're reading this, you now share that trust, that responsibility. Choose wisely. Evelyn closes the journal, feeling the weight of inheritance, not just of physical objects, but of moral purpose, of faith in human potential, despite human frailty. Her father had made his choice. Now she had made hers. And somewhere below, across America and beyond, countless others would soon make theirs as Project Horizon emerged from shadow into light. The helicopter flies on, carrying them toward debriefings and explanations, toward consequences both intended and unforeseen. But whatever awaits them, they have completed the mission begun in 1976. They have ensured that a technology with the potential to transform human civilization will not remain buried, will not be controlled by the few, will not be developed in secret for purposes its creators never intended. Your father would be proud, Ms. Hart, not just of what we've done, but of who you've proven to be. Evelyn watches the landscape pass below, the America her father and grandfather and brother had served, each in their own way. An America of contradictions and complexities, of high ideals and practical compromises, of ordinary people sometimes called to extraordinary choices. I think I would have been proud of him too, if I'd known the whole story. You know it now, and in a way you've finished writing it. The Bronze Star catches the sunlight streaming through the helicopter window, gleaming with the same quiet dignity her father had carried through his life, through war and peace, through classified missions and small-town moments, through a journey that had ended for him but continued through his daughter. Whatever comes next, debriefings, explanations, adjustments to a world where Project Horizon exists in the public domain, Evelyn Hart has honored her father's legacy in the truest possible way, not by preserving his secret, but by fulfilling its purpose, not by hiding his work, but by ensuring it would serve the greater good he had always believed in. The helicopter flies on, carrying them toward tomorrow. Behind them, in Fairhaven, Hart's Auto still stands, a modest garage where broken things become whole again under caring hands. A place where legacy lives not in grand monuments, but in the daily work of carrying forward what matters most. A reminder that sometimes the most important inheritances aren't the ones we can touch, but the ones that touch us. The principles, the purpose, the quiet dignity of doing what's right when it matters most. In her heart, Evelyn knows she'll return there someday. Return to the work her hands were made for. Return to the community that shaped her. But she'll return changed, carrying not just her father's medal, but his mission. Not just his name, but his vision for what technology should serve, for what knowledge should mean, for what legacy truly is. The helicopter flies on, and Evelyn Hart, daughter, mechanic, reluctant hero, flies with it, her father's journal secure in her hands, his purpose secure in her heart. The journey that began with a simple act of kindness, fixing a veteran's truck, has expanded beyond anything she could have imagined. But in the end, isn't that what legacy truly is? Not what we leave behind, but what grows from the seeds we plant. Not what we control, but what we set free. Her father understood that. Now, so does she. The helicopter flies on, carrying them toward whatever comes next. Project Horizon has emerged from shadow into light. And somewhere below, across an America still striving to live up to its highest ideals, the future is already beginning to change. 6 months after the disclosure of Project Horizon, Hart's Auto looks much the same from the outside. Weathered signs still hanging by that single rusted chain, gravel lot still bearing the tire marks of local vehicles, mountains still standing sentinel in the distance. But look closer, and the changes become apparent. New equipment visible through the open bay doors, a steady stream of customers, a help wanted sign in the window. Inside, Evelyn works beneath the hood of Mrs. Callaway's Chevy. The same vehicle she was repairing when Frank Bowers first rolled into her life. Her hands move with the same practiced precision, the same respect for machinery that has always defined her work. But around her neck, partially hidden by her coveralls, hangs her father's bronze star, no longer a secret, but a reminder. The congressional hearings lasted 3 weeks. Military officials, energy executives, scientists, and historians all testified about Project Horizon and the decisions that buried it half a century ago. Some called it the most significant disclosure of classified information since the Pentagon Papers. Others called it the most important scientific breakthrough since nuclear fission. Both were probably right. William Reynolds testified for 4 days straight, recounting the history of Sierra 9, the formation of Sentinel Squad, and the decades he spent monitoring the buried research. At 78, he sat ramrod straight in his chair, answering questions with the direct precision of a career military man. When asked if he regretted his actions, his response made headlines nationwide. "I regret only that it took 50 years for us to trust the American people with the truth." Frank Bowers and Margaret Chen testified as well, filling in the gaps of a story that spanned administrations and eras. Their testimony painted a picture not of villains and heroes, but of complex systems where good people sometimes made questionable decisions for what they believed were the right reasons, of institutional imperatives that occasionally overwhelmed individual conscience, of the fog of secrecy that can obscure even the noblest intentions. The Justice Department eventually declined to file charges against any of them. The statute of limitations had long expired on most potential violations, and prosecuting elderly veterans for preserving research that might help solve the climate crisis proved politically unpalatable. Instead, they received formal reprimands, ceremonial slaps on the wrist that acknowledged the breach of protocol while tacitly recognizing the service they had rendered. Colonel Howard Reynolds faced his own challenges within military channels. His decision to prevent Westfield from seizing Project Horizon materials, effectively enabling his father's disclosure plan, raised questions about his judgment and loyalty. But when questioned by his superiors, his answer echoed the same principle that had guided his father decades earlier. "I swore an oath to the Constitution, sir, not to classification protocols, not to energy conglomerates, and not to bureaucratic convenience." He retained his rank and position, though his career trajectory likely changed that day on the mountain. Some doors closed, others opened. Like his father before him, he discovered that the most important choices rarely come with clean, unambiguous outcomes. The scientific community embraced Project Horizon with both enthusiasm and caution. Research teams worldwide began exploring the catalytic energy technology, confirming its principles, refining its applications. The weaponization potential remained a concern, but the simultaneous global disclosure created exactly what William Reynolds had predicted: mutual oversight, shared responsibility, transparent development. Initial prototypes based on the Sierra 9 research appeared within months. Small-scale demonstrations proved the technology's viability. Energy companies pivoted from opposition to adaptation, recognizing that fighting the inevitable only ensured they would be left behind when the future arrived. Some sought to control and limit the technology's implementation. Others embraced its transformative potential. The battle between progress and profit continued as it always has, but now in the light rather than the shadow. For Evelyn Hart, the return to Fairhaven came after weeks of debriefings, interviews, and adjustments to a new reality where her family name appeared in history books and scientific journals. She declined the book deals, the speaking engagements, the offers to consult on the technology her father had helped preserve. Instead, she returned to the garage, to the work her hands were made for, to the community that had shaped her long before she knew the truth about Michael Hart. The bronze plaque beside the garage entrance is modest. In memory of Captain Michael J. Hart, Sentinel Squad, 1942 to 1991, he saw beyond his time. No mention of Project Horizon, no elaborate tribute, just acknowledgement of a man who made difficult choices when duty and conscience pointed in different directions. Dylan Carter never returned to Hart's Auto. His role as a Westfield asset was confirmed during the congressional investigations. But even there, the lines between right and wrong blurred. He had been recruited after military service, told he was helping secure dangerous technology from potential exploitation, never fully informed about who he was really working for or why. Another good person caught in systems larger than himself, making choices based on incomplete information. Evelyn sometimes wonders what happened to him after Westfield's contracts were suspended and their operations scrutinized. She hopes he found his way back to honest work, to a place where his skills serve something worthwhile. William Reynolds visits occasionally, making the drive from Sheridan, where he's established a modest consultation practice, advising on the ethical implementation of Project Horizon technology. His relationship with his son remains complicated. Too much history, too many divergent choices. But they speak regularly now, rebuilding connections long neglected. Sometimes Howard joins him on these visits, bringing his own children to meet the mechanic who helped change the course of energy history. The next generation of Reynolds, unburdened by Cold War secrecy, looking toward a future their grandfather and father both fought to protect in their different ways. Frank and Margaret check in too, united by experiences few others could understand. They've started an advocacy organization focusing on government transparency and responsible technology development, turning their decades of secrecy into a mission of openness. The ironies don't escape them, but after 50 years of shadows, they've earned the right to choose light. Not everything changed. The world still faces challenges: climate disruption, resource competition, the eternal human struggle between cooperation and conflict. Project Horizon didn't solve these problems overnight. No technology could, but it offered options that hadn't existed before, pathways previously closed, possibilities where once there had been only limitations. On the workbench in the corner of the garage, beside the coffee maker that still brews the same strong blend her father favored, sits a small device. One of the first commercially produced catalytic energy cells based on the Sierra 9 research. It powers the entire building now, silently, efficiently, testament to what can emerge when knowledge serves humanity rather than institutions, when secrets give way to shared understanding, when the past offers its wisdom to the future. Each morning, Evelyn starts the day the same way, coffee in hand, bronze star around her neck, standing before the wall of family photographs, her grandfather in army dress blues, her father in desert camo, her brother in his service photo. And now, beside her high school graduation picture, a new addition, Evelyn testifying before Congress, continuing the Hart family tradition of service in her own unexpected way. Different uniforms, different battlefields, same underlying commitment to something larger than themselves. The bell above the garage door jingles as the first customer of the day arrives. Evelyn sets down her coffee, adjusts the bronze star so it rests properly beneath her coveralls, and turns to the work at hand. There are still engines to fix, still broken things that need mending, still a community that relies on skilled hands and honest work. The world may now know about Project Horizon, but here in Fairhaven, what matters most hasn't changed. Legacy, Evelyn has learned, isn't what we leave behind, but what we set in motion. Not what we control, but what we nurture. Not monuments or medals or mentions in history books, but the quiet ripples of choices made when it matters most. Her father understood that. Now so does she.